Hi, everybody. I just want to say thank you all for coming. And I'm just going to go ahead and introduce Michael Horn. He's the authorized American media representative for the Billy Meier Contacts.
I also thank you again, and I think it's extremely considerate of people already that you've left a complete row for the Kelseyville out-of-body singles club members that are seated here transparent in front of you. We're going to, I generally have a whole preparation, a whole bunch of slides and information to present. But I also, with the events of the last day and et cetera, I'm also mindful of the fact that people may have specific questions about things that may or may not also fit in with the chronology of my presentation. So what I want to do is this. I'm going to kind of go through things. If you find that you have a question, all I ask is that you raise your hand. I'll complete whatever it is I'm saying, and we'll probably get on to trying to answer questions. Some of these things will get answered as we unfold. So I'll ask you a couple questions first, like how many people here know about this case in particular with Billy Meier? Just raise your hand. Okay, and most people don't, right? How many people here are interested in the overall topic of extraterrestrial life? Okay, all right. How many people think that we've already had visits from people or other beings? And how many people think that there may actually be extraterrestrials on Earth doing all sorts of things? Okay. Well, that concludes my presentation. Have a great time. All right, was there a question already? Is that what's happening? Okay. So this has been up on display since people walked in. And I am going to suggest that apart from the images we show you, you've never seen really clear photographic evidence of craft not originating on this world, on this Earth. Of course, you will have to make up your own mind if that's true or not. I will only say right now, as I probably will repeat, that all the photographic evidence you'll see was taken by this man, Billy Meier, long before there were digital effects, Photoshop, home computers. So everything was done with film cameras. And he's a one-armed man, so he was doing a lot of this. So you may want to take one more look at this before we go on. I like to set up this premise about the confirmed existence of extraterrestrial life. You notice in the beginning when I asked how many people think or believe that there's been, and almost everybody raised their hands. Yet, if you speak to the majority of scientists, none of them will agree with you. They will say, and rightly so, where's the evidence? What evidence? So, it would be the single greatest discovery if we had evidence for it, and that discovery would be exceeded only by, well, the actual contact with other life forms, extraterrestrials. And what we're going to present today will support that premise or not, depending on what you make of it. We have to always consider what is the criteria that's used for determining the truth, right? And everybody can see the screen well enough? That criteria is, or the criteria are, I guess, correctly, the quantity and quality of actual evidence. If I went and asked each person that believes, has reason in their own mind, to accept the idea or believe that extraterrestrials have been around Earth, if I asked you, what evidence do you base it on? I doubt that you'd be able to refer specifically to actual evidence other than anecdotal evidence and people's claims and beliefs. We want to get past that. So what questions, do any people here have any questions that they are holding about either this case in particular or about so-called extraterrestrial life? So you brought up the question about the pyramids in Egypt, and this particular case is loaded with information, most of which pertains to us on our world, our history. Very, very, very vast information. And that information also includes topics like the pyramids. So as an overview, to kind of descend on that, let me try and get to that one. We are told that the pyramids in Egypt and some which exist in other places around the world go back over 73,360 years or so. That they were created long ago, that they were made by Earth people with the assistance of human beings from another world, primarily in the Orion galaxy, star system. Those of you who are familiar with Orion, the three stars in the belt of Orion, so when the Giza pyramids are looked at from the top down, that is the configuration from the belt of Orion. The Sphinx is more recent, and it faces the constellation of Leo. Now, in terms of the stones, what we're told in this case is that the stones, in all cases, were relatively locally quarried. That may or may not agree with everybody's point of view, and that isn't, in my opinion, the most important part of this. Because the pyramids themselves were constructed to represent and deliver a lot of information. They originally represented a distance from the Earth to the Sun. There's all sorts of mathematics built in, which have been altered because of the change in dimension of the pyramids over time. There used to be a capstone on the Great Pyramid, which raised its height. And, you know, it's funny we bring this up because in this material, some time ago, Meier, this man, was told that in the future, people will correct the value of pi. I'm not a mathematician, but it's so funny that we're having it this way because there's so much other information. So what happened was, in this whole situation with valuation of pi and all, which is also connected to the measurements in the pyramid and what have you, it was told to Meier that we will need to get the true value of pi corrected in order for us to progress into true space travel and lots of things like that. Not too long ago, a kind of eccentric, in a nice way, mathematician living in Idaho said he's come up with the true value of pi. And he went to Switzerland to see Billy because he's been involved in studying the case for a while. And he gave Billy that information, and he spoke, supposedly here, with the Pleiadian extraterrestrials who said, well, that is the correct answer. Now, he's not the first person, from what I could tell, who came up with that, but he did something that none of the others did. He made a physical representation so that he could measure it, and the measurement comes out to this new value, 3.144 something, right, instead of 3.141 or whatever. Okay. So why this is now important to us is that we have an object heading towards Earth called asteroid Apophis. How many people here have heard of that? Oh, okay. All right, so it's so funny how the circumstance changes things. So we're going to talk a little bit about that while this gets relaunchified or whatever here. All right, so in 1981, Billy Meier was meeting, and I'll just say this in the beginning so that it's really clear, because otherwise people might, go, well, I don't know. Allegedly, or according to the information in the case, is what I will say when I cannot prove something, or it hasn't been proved by others to a scientific standard. So there's a lot of, according to the information in the case, In 1981, Meier published information about a conversation, a couple actually, that he had, that began in 81, with the Pleiadian, pertaining to an object that they call the red meteor. And they said to him, this red meteor is heading towards Earth, and there's going to be two occasions when it passes, or on one or the other, when it slams into the Earth. In 2029 or 36. They told him that it was necessary for a true international effort of scientists to come together to deflect this object in time, not to blow it up, because if we try to blow it up, we're going to have asteroid pieces raining down on Earth like crazy, which has happened before in our history, but we don't necessarily know about it, but we may get into that. So that's in 1981. In 2004, 23 years later, NASA discovers an incoming object, an asteroid, that they call Apophis, which I think in the Egyptian mythology means the destroyer, a very apt name. And this thing is coming in, and they're not concerned. No, there's no problem. It's not going to hit the Earth. Won't happen. The Russians, the Chinese, the European space agencies, they're all starting to look at this, and we published this information from Meier. As a matter of fact, we even published it in comic book form in 7 languages, so that people who might not otherwise read it all might say, oh, what's that about, and read it. Well, shortly after we get it published out into the world, the Russians make an announcement that they are going to have a project to deflect Apophis, which is exactly what the play arm said. So, we have this asteroid coming towards Earth. NASA, a few years ago, did something rather unusual. They changed the size estimate that they made of Apophis to now within 25 meters of what Meier published 23 years ago, or maybe shortly thereafter. And now they're taking it a bit more seriously. I did a blog that says NASA discovers the Earth is round, meaning that if this thing slams into Eastern Europe, well, between the North Sea and the Black Sea, it's going to create huge upheaval on Earth in many ways. It'll crack open the surface of the Earth, a new continent will pop up somewhere, there'll be gases and floods and tsunamis and all sorts of things, darkening of the skies. And so maybe NASA realizes that it isn't just something that happens over there to somebody else. So now they apparently are engaging more in it. And Harry Lear, the mathematician, and a couple other guys that I'm involved with as well, a guy named Kenneth Smith, they are all involved right now in sending out information to the space agencies, to groups at places like MIT and others that are working on Apophis, and they're just inviting mathematicians and space scientists to please do the math. Make this test and measure it. Don't rely solely on the figures for pi that have been assumed to be correct all this time. The hardest thing you can do, in many ways here, is to get scientists and mathematicians and people who think they already know everything to, I use the term, to look through the proverbial telescope. Many of you are familiar with the fact that Galileo tried to get the church to look through the telescope. Trying to get scientists today to even look at the Meier material has been very challenging. I do have people who are aerospace professionals, physicists, and others now who have done that and who know the case is real. We'll get to that. Next question.
Yes, please. So, I'm sorry to hog up all your time, but I mean, like, as far as those people go, I mean, they did the math, I'm sure, but, so we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? But I mean, that was on the top of the north, south, southern hemisphere. I mean, did that move the axis? I think so. Well,
let's do something with that, because this is the kind of thing we can add more in as we go through here. But just in terms of that,
sure,
that information seems to be confirmed in the Meier material. That some of these really mega explosions have affected the axis. The poles are slowly shifting. The new North Pole is going to end up being at Mecca. And that is something, and there's a lot of magnetic disturbances, a lot of things going on, and hopefully we'll get to most of the things that are relevant to most people here. Some of this I want to go through a little quickly, unless you want me to linger, and a hand going up as I'm going through it'll, but let's not get into too many in-depth questions so we get some of this to see if it answers some of the things you're curious about. So who is Billy Meier? He is a man who, this is a photograph of as a boy, probably has the most documented life of any person that I know of who's still living. Goes back to the age of 4 here. This is said to be his first extraterrestrial mentor, teacher, a man named Svath, whose information we will come to in here a little ways in. Some of the specific prophetic and predictive, ironclad accurate information he provided to Meier when Meier was as young as, oh my gosh, 7, 8 years old. So we will get into that. And this is a man named Father Zimmerman. There's a hand in the back.
Well, that last picture that you just showed us, Spa, it looks like he has like a spacesuit on that
Yes.
had a bow, like a glass
Yeah, there's no helmet here actually in
No,
this,
yeah,
but he did have a fitting for it because young Meier, when Billy Meier recounted everything about his life, we have films out about this and everything, he spoke about his first meeting, his actual meeting. He was only like 5 years old. And he said, I saw this older looking man standing next to a pear-shaped craft. And he looked like he was in a deep sea diver suit without the helmet on. And he said, there was nothing that I was afraid of. This man had a very benevolent and kind demeanor to him. And when he beckoned me to come forward to him, I did so without hesitation or fear, and it began his actual mentoring that lasted 11 years with Svath, in which all sorts of things were done to increase the young fellow's memories, to awaken him to certain things, to expand and accelerate his mental intellectual growth. So it said in the case. As I say, Father Zimmerman was the parish priest. He had been contacted initially by Svath also, telepathically, because Father Zimmerman, while he was a religious man in this little Swiss village, he also was pretty developed in his consciousness and he was open to it. So Svath communicated to Father Zimmerman that he should be ready to receive young Meier, who will come to him a bit confused and concerned. Is this okay? Because he first had heard telepathically, he'd heard Svath speak to him. He's trying to figure out what's going on, and then he starts to meet with him. And Father Zimmerman was very instrumental in assuring him of this, that this was safe, it was good, it wasn't the work of the devil or anything like that. And Father Zimmerman was apparently a very good and lighthearted guy as well, but well respected in his community. And here we have a couple more photos of Meier when he's young. I'm going to move through it a bit just so that we don't linger too much. We can always revisit any of this that you want. After 11 years of tutoring with Svath, after Svath was just about ready to pass out of life, Meier's contacts began with a woman named Esket, who, these are all human beings. They come from different races. Meier has seen representatives of many different races. Most look very much like us. Some look different. But we're not talking about so-called reptilians and greys and all this stuff that is mainly the work of the disinformation agencies. That's another topic. So Meier, under the tutelage, if you will, and mentorship of Esket, Meier embarked on many travels on Earth, as well as with her in some very, very unusual ways concerning space and time. And he still had two hands during those days before he would lose his left arm. And he got around quite a bit. He traveled through about 42 different countries, always working odd jobs, different things, whatever, to support himself. Here, Meier's in the middle of a bunch of Jordanian partisans in the desert. I think at this time he was looking for the person who had killed one of his girlfriends. He has a life that's like Indiana Jones meets Lawrence of Arabia meets Luke Skywalker and everything in between and beyond. And his passport bears testimony to many different places. He was also with, he met with King Hussein of Jordan, who he thought was an exceptionally good man and a kind person, and he had great regard for him. He met with many different leaders, or people who would become leaders. He even met with Saddam Hussein when they were both roughly around the same age in Iraq. And he said at that time Saddam Hussein already had ambitions to be a major leader, and he would do anything to attain power. He would pretend to be very religious for the people who needed that, but he always had the agenda to get power and hold it tight in his fist. Now, Meier was also known as the Phantom in the Middle East. During this period of his life, and you can see he had weapons and things for self-defense mainly, he was hired by police departments in West Pakistan and Turkey, India I believe, to bring in serial killers and mass murderers, in other words, psychopaths who threatened the community. Billy told me personally, he says, I never killed anybody, but I did defend myself sometimes, and I would have to wound somebody, and then the authorities could bring them in. So he would go out and do what other people were not quite ready to do. And here he is as a young man, maybe 27 or something. In Pakistan, in 1964, he gets his name Billy. His real name is Edward Albert Meier. And he gets the nickname Billy from an American woman from California who had been traveling around, and she said, "You really remind me of these people from the Wild West, like, Wild Bill, Hickok, and different people. But the Billy the Kid was, I think, the big one." So in India, he creates what I refer to as the foundational evidence. Now, we've established that at this time he's working with this woman, Asket. She is mentoring him, having him come on board the ships and take trips, some interesting places and times as well. But in 1964, Meier is in India at the Ashoka Ashram, and there she gives him his first major and or remaining photographic evidence. Again, all taken with a 35mm camera. We know the make, we know the model, we know the film that was used in it because extensive testing has been done on any and all of Meier's early photographs that were available, especially from the about 75 on, but we'll get back to this. So you have these different photos where the craft is above a building. Some remained in sepia tone, some are not. A little close up. This one is very interesting because Asket and 7 of the members in her group appeared over the ashram. There's a young woman in the foreground there, if you can tell. Over 100 people easily saw the craft around the ashram, and at a railway station in India, even more people have seen the craft. Well, Asket is appearing in the skies here. All right, now Asket does something else that's kind of cute. And this photo, what you see here is an overall. This is Billy's photo album. And when we made a film in 2006, 2008 is when it came out, called The Silent Revolution of Truth. And that film is available on YouTube and all that. Okay, I was up, my nose was right on this thing because I saw this photo and I said, "Billy, what's this?" And so we filmed it, we did a screen capture for one of the films. This is Meier sitting in the foreground. Behind him is a spire from one of the buildings at the ashram. He's just sitting casually on the ground. Now, the cross in the sky, I really looked at this photograph. This isn't done with adhesive tape. It wasn't painted on. You can see clouds even still partially in front. Asket generated a hologram, 1964, in the sky. And people have pondered and wondered, well, what's this about? Why this photograph? I came to my own conclusion as to what it was about. I'll tell you in a minute. First, I'll tell you, it was taken with this 1940s bellows type cameras. All of the previous photos were. My father had one of these. These were made, as they say, in the 1940s. No special effects, possibly. You're lucky to get photographs out of the darn thing. It would pull out, and then you'd have to stand there real still, click, 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 to get photographs. Okay. Well, with these photographs, Meier attracted the attention of a journalist, very well-respected journalist, at a very credible newspaper that had been in existence for over 100 years at the time that they ran this article on Meier. And in the article, which of course you won't be able to see all the detail here, the guy speaks about seeing 80 photographs of UFOs, including that cross in the sky. Now, someone happened to ask me, why do you think that photo? I said, well, based on all the information that I'm familiar with in the case, here's my thinking. Here's Billy Meier. And again, this is, don't have to accept this, the current prophet for Earth, the last and final prophet, sitting on the ground in India, which is where supposedly the prophet Emmanuel, who's Emmanuel? We have Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. Emmanuel? Well, according to the information in this case, there never was a human being named Jesus Christ who lived on earth. There was a man named Emmanuel, and you can find 2 bare traces of it, one in the Old Testament, Isaiah 7:14, and his name shall be called Emmanuel, Isaiah foretells it, and in Matthew 1:23 or so, and his name shall be called Emmanuel. That's the only remaining textual evidence that I know of for Emmanuel, other than a major book which has now been translated into English and is available. We'll get there. Supposedly, Emmanuel lived. A lot of what's in the book of Matthew is accurate or almost accurate. And indeed, Emmanuel had gone through the crucifixion and survived it, and made his way with his mother and a brother and a couple of the disciples through numerous countries and settled in India. There are 2 tombs in India, and this material is not the only one to bring it up. There's a tomb for Mary and a tomb for Isa, at the base of which, on the Isa tomb, 2 human feet with 2 dots in the center, saying, "Here lies a great teacher who came from the land where he was crucified to come here and teach us." According to the information of the case, Emmanuel's mother Mary died when he was about 48, well after this crucifixion, and he married an Indian woman who bore him numerous descendants. And that leads to a number of other things that are important.
Which Indian? American or Hindi?
Excuse me, could you raise your hand?
Which Indian? American or Hindi?
Okay. Just for further reference, if you've got a question, pop it up so I can see it and call. I got it. So it's East India, India across the sea. India, right. So what happens here is, in that photograph, let's go back to it for a moment. We have Meier, the current prophet, according to this, in India, where Emmanuel finally died and is buried, with the symbol above his head as what's recognized internationally as the cross that represented Emmanuel, aka Jesus. The true cross was not shaped this way, it was a Y-shaped cross. But here it is as symbology for those that want to look at that. Okay, now, what ties more of this together, apart from my trying to find it all, is this woman, who was a young girl at the time named Pobal Cheng, and that, you may have quickly caught the text, said, now a retired UN diplomat from Cambodia. Well, this is her when she was a young girl, with her brother. The man in the center is the head monk at the Ashoka ashram in India, where Meier was studying Buddhism, where Meier was photographed on the ground, where those photographs that you saw were taken. Now, Pobal Cheng, some years ago, came forward, and she made a public presentation, and there was another woman with her from India who was also, at the time, when she was a child, was there. And she said, look, people have been contacting me since this Billy Meier case has become public. And they're saying, wait a minute, weren't you at the Ashoka ashram? Weren't you at the Ashoka? What is it? She said, you know, after I left the ashram, I went through my education. I became a diplomat for Cambodia, served there 12 years, retired, and I had put all of this behind me. But I have to come forward now because also Billy Meier is attacked all over the place as being a hoaxer and all this stuff. She said, okay, I will tell you the story. I was there with my brother, my uncle. I saw Asket. She used to sometimes come into my room at night when I was falling asleep, and she'd sit there and hum or whatever, and I'd fall asleep in the morning. I would wake up feeling like I knew a lot more than when I went to sleep. And I saw Billy walking with Asket. Most everybody there did. And I just have to, you know, give up my privacy a little bit to come forward and speak up for him. We've got a couple of photographs, you know, a couple more. Here she is with Billy in 2000. She found her way to go to Switzerland, and she brought her husband along, and they spent hours and hours and hours speaking about things.
Did you say Emmanuel married an Indian woman?
That's correct.
Do you know her name?
No. It may well actually be somewhere in the material. The question was referring to, I said Emmanuel had married an Indian woman. Do I know her name? No, I don't know her name. But somewhere in there, I think I once saw it. I just never grasped it. So all of this stuff, especially with Pobal Cheng and the woman who also came up with her and gave testimony about, well, yeah, we were there, this is real. In that photograph I showed you with Pobal with a UFO, she said, well, this happened over this particular hill, and we would see the craft there and all this. So when I made the film, The Silent Revolution of Truth, I brought in two people. One was a psychotherapist to make comments. He was the other side of the spectrum. What about people who claim that there's extraterrestrials and that they meet with them and blah, blah. And the therapist said, well, you know, a lot of people, they may be schizophrenic and all that. On the other hand, who knows, maybe some of it's true. Well, I brought in a guy who trained special forces and all in reading body language for the military. And why? Because his training was to help soldiers who were, you know, high-level functioning operative soldiers to be able to quickly assess another person that comes into their field of vision for threat assessment. So what are the tells and the cues that you can read really quickly because your life and the life of another person or more can be at stake, right? So I had him watch a video with Billy Meier speaking and one with Po Bol Chang. But I turned the volume down so he couldn't tell what they were saying. So that, because he didn't know who Billy Meier was, and I didn't want him to be prejudiced in terms of what he was hearing in reading with people. And basically what he says in the film is, thumbs up, they're both telling you what they seriously believe. There's no evidence of trickery, lying, or whatever. Okay. Now, about 16 months ago on a Saturday morning, I'm living in Arizona, and my phone rings. And it's a guy who says, hi, I'm Joe. Older, kind of crusty guy, really intense. Right away, I go, Joe, who's Joe? He says, look, I'm an investigator. He didn't say what kind. And I found your Billy Meier case. And I'm wondering if you're willing to talk about it, because I think it could be a hoax. I said, let's talk. So for 3 months, Joe would call like clockwork, Saturday morning, the phone rings, and we're discussing the Billy Meier case. And then something happens where we both get kind of irritated with each other. And he's no more calls. Then, somewhere around August or September, Joe pops up again, says, you're still willing to talk to me? I said, oh yeah, of course. He said, okay, let me tell you who I am. I'm the former top case supervisor for the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation, 1965 to 1971. I said, oh really? Yeah. You know, so then he sends me documentation. And most of it's like, you know, all these glowing recommendations about how good this guy is in his job. And he said, you know, I've personally vetted hundreds of people. Some who were seeking higher office, some who were seeking even higher office, people who could end up with their hands on a nuclear trigger. I helped the military ferret out spies and moles. I've spent more time reading body language and reading people, and I want to tell you about your Billy Meier case. And he said, fire away, Joe. So Joe tells me the Billy Meier case is 100% ironclad authentic. I said, really? I agree with you, but how did you come to those conclusions? Well, Joe decided to look at that foundational evidence from India. And what he said was, here's a kid, or young guy, 27 years of age, a vagabond essentially, traveling around in the middle of nowhere in India, hitchhiking, doesn't have money, he's got a 1940s camera, nothing fancy, and you have a credible newspaper with an article where the reporter has seen 80 UFO photos. He says, I have a question. I have a challenge. Where did you get 80 UFO photos in the middle of nowhere in India? He said, don't give me theories. He said, investigation proceeds along very specific lines. Means, motive, opportunity, among the cornerstones of any real investigation. He said, he gave me an example. He says, you know, for instance, someone's accused of a murder. They find that the gun used was the gun he owned. They find his wallet at the scene. And somebody says they saw him there. You'd think that it's a slam dunk, except for one thing. There's video of him being 1,000 miles away at a wedding at the time. Done. He's not guilty. So people that accuse Meier, with all of the evidence that Meier has presented, they have to show, how did this guy come up with 80 UFO photos, 1964, and you still have 10, 12 of them? And then he said, on top of that, and this is, of course, new information right now to you, he said, Wally Gentleman. Now, Wally Gentleman was a special effects director for a film called 2001. Some people heard of it? It's a while back, okay. And that means that Stanley Kubrick had hired Wally Gentleman to direct all the special effects. That's not some model maker somewhere, you know, some kid. That's a guy who at the time was doing state-of-the-art special effects. And they showed him Meier's film. And he said, I could duplicate it if I had $15,000 for this and $30,000 for that and another $30,000. I could duplicate it for about $80,000. And so they said to him, well, he shot it with a handheld, you know, film camera, not even a video camera. He said, no. He says, it has to be real. It has to be real. So we have Joe Tisk, who's an investigator who considers those things, and he says, look, unless those two things are answered with evidence, he said, I will personally take on any skeptics for you. And we've had, as you can imagine, we've had skeptics coming at us for a very, very long time. Well, Joe actually did take on 2 skeptics. And after he did that, he called me up and he said, I don't know how you can talk to these people because none of them know what they're talking about. They're not investigators. These people in the UFO field, they don't know what they're talking about. So he says, you know, I had a headache from it, but I'll tell you right now, none of them can answer this. And I know that too, of course. So then about a week or 2 after Joe gives me this whole long thing, which we have published now in article form on the website, which has virtually stopped all the skeptical attacks. Anytime somebody pops up, I say, read this article, and then they never come back. Well, this guy is a former prosecutor and trial attorney, Robert Joyner, and he looked at all the scientific evidence that we pulled together and examined in the case. And we have a tremendous amount of information, and I'll just jump a little ahead to say that we have over 200 specific examples of Meier's prophetically accurate scientific and world event-related information, which means this, that Billy Meier has verifiably published certain specific information anywhere from 5 months to 60 years before it's either discovered or the events occur. And I mean, sometimes the new discoveries use the same language that we have it in books published, but their copyright dates. That's ironclad. Okay. I have a couple of other guys on my research team, if you will. So Matthew Wiskowitz, as you see here, former NASA aerospace engineer, worked on the space shuttle, worked on the space station, worked for various Honeywell, Rockwell, all these people. And he first came in contact with the Meier material also close to 40 years ago, like as I did. And he at first thought it was a hoax because he read all of this info online, which he has now found out is mainly CIA-created stuff. It goes even, if you knew the truth about how much effort they go to keep this out of the news. That's why when I said how many people have heard about this before, you know, a couple of hands ago. If this is real, you know, why doesn't everybody know? And that's something else. Okay, Kenneth Smith is the recently retired operations director VP from Orbital Flight Systems in Tucson. And he's another guy that knows that this is real, and he's come forward to support it. And he has people still working at Orbital and other places who are high-level, top secret, all that stuff. And they've said to him, yeah, we know this is real too, you know, go for it, do something. So, this is, oops, go back. India, we have that foundational evidence. That's the first actual evidence, and it actually establishes the credibility, authenticity of the extraterrestrial origin of these objects. And then you can draw other deductive conclusions about it. So, consider the singular historical significance. So, if we consider that, then we're going to go, well, if that's true, if all of that is even possibly true, what's the reason for it? Why? It isn't for us to play video games online, that's for sure. So we're going to discover the truth. The truth, which is something rarely spoken about. You will, if you go into so-called UFO circles and all that, they're not particular. I never see it mentioned. It's always the next light in the sky. And the truth is very, very often quite harsh. especially the more you get into this material to find out what it's about, because it's also to help us assure our own very threatened future survival. Nobody's going to do it for us. We're not being attacked by aliens, extraterrestrials, and nobody's coming down to clean up our mess. That is pretty darn sure at this point. In 1975 then, after Askett's 11 years with Billy, we have what are called the official contacts starting, and that means that the contacts and the evidence and information from, be careful you don't sit on one of the people from the out-of-body signals, all of the information and evidence that is now forthcoming from 1975 is meant for public dissemination. And the woman who now takes over contacts with Billy is called Semyaze. And yes, we know there's similar names in the Bible and all. There's info on that as well. Meier had lost his arm in 1964, really bad bus accident, 64, 65. And so he is a one-armed man at this time. And here he's photographed with his now ex-wife and their 3 young children. He was working at part-time disability. He worked part-time as a night watchman while he was literally single-handedly building a home which is now the center in Switzerland. Semyaze's father is a man called Ptah, similar to the ancient Egyptian name Ptah, but a different. There's also more information on that. I'm not going to go into every detail on this stuff because we would be here for days. Ptah is Semyaze's father, the leader of the Pleiadian race. One of his right-hand men, so to speak, is Quetzal, not the same as Quetzalcoatl. There's a woman named Florina, who also works with them, and many others, but these drawings were done with the help of the Pleiadian telepathically. They did rough sketches and then worked telepathically to guide one of the people at the center, or 2 of them actually, to refine the drawings to look like them. Now, when we speak about the 1975 evidence, just like when you walked in, most everybody who walked in saw one of the crafts there. Well, Billy's photos are the clearest, closest, absolutely vetted over a period of 40 years with state-of-the-art technology, photographs of actual objects not made by anybody on Earth. He's taken over 1,200. There are 8 remaining films. There's a video. So there's metal samples. There's lots of stuff. In this particular sequence, we showed one of the photos at the beginning. They moved the tree, they moved the craft around the tree in different angles so that he could photograph it. And you can see that there's the reflection of the sky and tree and all the rest of it. Different distances, so you would get closer or walk back a little farther. We're in show and tell right now for you guys.
Show and tell, I love it.
Okay. So again, photographs reflecting the objects they're near. We even know what kind of trees these are. We had forestry experts look at some of these photos years ago, and the guy who sent them, who was a former professor at OSU himself, told the other professors who were forestry experts, forget about the thing. Are these model trees, miniature trees? And they all said, no, those are real trees. And they explained why. There's pruning marks, there's nesting at the top. He said, nobody makes miniature trees like that. And we can tell, we know what the species is and everything. Meier took photographs and films of up to 3 of the objects at a time. Actually, photographs of up to 4. In the film that this comes from, and I'm not showing a bunch of films, they've got some to do. Those 2 discs that are there kind of wobbling around, suddenly they simply disappear and there's only one left to view. This photo Meier took from inside one of the craft, looking out a window at 2 other craft. That's Switzerland down there. That's a craft. And there's a craft. And he took one more. 2 craft outside the window. How nice. This is a famous photograph called the sunlight shot. The reason this is so interesting is because on really close magnification examination, those branches are shown to be in front of the craft. Now that means that that craft is approximately 21, 23 feet in diameter. These are real and large trees. We may be able to get a little something going here. I'll explain what this is because you just hear a little number. Not Meier, but someone is showing the photographs here that you just saw, one of them. And there is a tree in full bloom. And this is a director from Nippon TV with Billy walking up the hill towards the tree. And Billy's going to explain to him a little more, and the director's talking about the environment. And you can see other trees that were just branches below the horizon there, tall trees, are now also in bloom. Now we'll let this go a little more because I want to see if they get, I think they get a little closer to the tree, and you start to get a sense that that is a tall tree. And ultimately, I think that tree was between 30-something and 40 feet tall, probably easily. So when you see that craft, you're not looking at a model. It's not in front of the tree, it's behind the branches. So you see, especially now that they're closer to the scale, that's how big they are compared to the tree. I'm going to move it along. Now, if you can hear this music, pretend you didn't. For some reason, they decided to put this music on. Billy here has zoomed in. Now watch for lights. There's one, there's one. Did you catch that?
Yeah.
So there it is again. You'll see this again. You'll hear the sound of the ship now. These sounds were analyzed in 4 different sound studios, including the one in Groton, Connecticut, Naval Undersea Lab. They could not identify the sound. Watch again for the lights. There. Broad daylight. So he's got an 8mm film camera, and he has zoomed in on this thing. Every one of the 4 studios said they could not reproduce it. Question?
Yeah, it almost sounds like the noise is made for underwater.
It sounds like it, but what they did is they scoped it. We've got that on film too. And there were 24 simultaneously interfacing, very discrete frequencies with overtones apparently for 8 more sounds. So they concluded that there were a total of about 32 specific sounds in there. At the time they analyzed, back around 1980, they said, we probably have to bring in a bank of synthesizers to duplicate that. These films, when Meier recorded the sounds, on 2 occasions he was out in a field. There were at one point 17 people there altogether, including an undercover policeman. And no speakers, I mean, he's out in a big field, and this thing is booming so loudly there that people came from over 4 kilometers away trying to figure out what the noise was that they could hear at a great distance.
Question.
Yes?
8mm film doesn't record sound, so would there be a tape recorder on the side?
He had tape recorders.
Thank you.
Yeah. And they have the I think one was in Iowa or something. We have all the actual reports on the photographic analyses, sound analysis, metal analysis, all for free on my website. And I'll give that information for any that are interested. This is Meier's first film. Now look at the distance between the top sky and this, because people say, oh, it's just an object in a pendulum. Now also watch the top of the tree, because it will move under the backwash. And what they also found out, which was, you want to see it again? Okay. Hold on. Here we go. So you'll see the top of the tree at a certain point will move. And actually, when this film begins, the object is hovering to the side for a second or two. When this was analyzed...
Because most people thought it was tethered to the tree, like a yo-yo.
Yeah, and it wasn't. They actually did, they did things where they went, in order for the apex to be here, move. Well, it doesn't work because it would have to have then been moved to here. It's all explained there.
I've got the investigation printed. It's out on the table.
It's over there on the table, and this is what I'm showing you the front of it. They found out that in one of the frames, the craft was in one frame in 2 places at the same time. In a fraction. And it was captured when they analyzed, and somebody's just sent me some other stuff to look at for analysis that may hold other information. This stuff is, to say the least, rather interesting. Now, This is what's called the wedding cake UFO. And most everybody, including two of the original investigators, said, "Oh, that's got to be a hoax. Nobody could, nobody would make that thing." Again, a real tree, pruning marks, etc. Another angle of it. And here it is. Meier's within 15 feet of it on the ground, in his front yard, literally.
What are those round spheres? Do they do anything?
These?
Yeah.
We don't have definitive information, except that in some of the reports when they're talking about energy collectors and blah, blah, blah.
We didn't have those type of telescopic lenses at that time.
Right. And speaking of lenses, if you can see there's a blue inside of there are some kind of lenses in at least two of those things. There's 100 of these red light things around the whole thing, plus blue and green one. Maybe you can see a little more detail. It's a little blurry, but this thing wasn't made by Billy Meier. We've concluded it. Now, I'm going to take you back so you can see something here. You see this? You see this ridge line around it? Right there, right? So what we have here is we've got the various globes here, and just above them we've got that ridge, and then we go into that dome, mini dome. Now let's go here. This was photographed at night. That's where that line was. This cupola actually raises up. Now, the skeptic said, that's a gold model against the black curtain. They were firm about that. Then a funny thing happened. One of the people who do you have that other, Zahi's book there, right? There is a whole analysis done on this recently in the past couple of years. What's interesting about it? Well, let's just look a little more. This is what it looks like at night, apparently. All of these things perfectly set around that rim. These details are a little fuzzy in this resolution, but
Motives, right.
just all sorts of stuff. Okay. So we come back to that. So Raul Zahi, who did the analysis on this, takes this photograph right off the internet, 35mm photo, drops it into Photoshop, and he raises the contrast and lowers the brightness, or vice versa, and he gets this. An object hovering above a gravel road. That's one of those meter-high markers they have in Switzerland along the road. That's a grassy hill. Again, I know you can't see everything there. And the ship now shows an energy field around it. Another guy did it, just changed the settings. He gets virtually the same thing. Some kind of energy emanating from this craft. How did Meier get there? He's above the ground. Meier was sitting on the rim, he said, of one of the craft above the earth. And he's photographing this. And I even had it displayed in Times Square for a few minutes. This is the book on the analysis of the wedding cake UFO that you can see over there. And then Meier also photographed another really screwy thing. This is an energy shed. Well, the skeptics jumped on this. Oh, it's a deliberate double exposure. It's a fluorescent light. And, So a guy I knew at the time who was not into UFOs happened to have been, I knew him from high school, and he'd been for 50 years involved in filmmaking and special effects, Disney, all sorts of stuff. So I said, Ken, take a look at that. What is that? He said, he says, that's a triple exposure done inside the camera accidentally. He says, that's not an outside effect. And subsequent to this, Raul Zahi has a whole analysis that I think he and Chris Locke, a guy in Japan, did, showing that this is a real object. It changes shape and size, emanates light in very funny ways. Well, in about 2000, I don't know if it was 5 or 6, I was contacted by a film crew from London who said they wanted to go over and interview Billy Meier for 15 minutes. I said, well, I'm going to be over there in May. Why don't you guys come on over? 15 minutes, we'll get it for you. So they came, and about an hour and a half into this 15-minute interview, someone walks in and says to Billy, hey, why don't you show them the handprints? Oh, yeah, the handprints. So we go out to the parking lot, and Billy's stepson has a little Subaru wagon parked out there. Now, if you will look carefully, thumb, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's Billy's hand there. And this is not the play iron. This is not the play iron. This is another race that worked with the play iron who came to do the monitoring. There's a monitoring that goes on over there in Switzerland all the time. And they came to do the monitoring while the play iron were off somewhere else. And one of the little guys did this. Why is this effect? As Billy was told when he first met him, he said he was introduced to these two people there, Trilaner. They're from some other civilization, and he wanted to shake hands with the guy. And Ptah said, I don't think you should do that. And Billy says, well, you know, it's our way. He says, no, that's fine, but don't do that. He says, their chemistry is different, very different than yours. And he said, well, what if we just touch fingers? You know, like he said, my finger burned for a week. Their skin composition is very, very acidic compared to ours. So when they laid their hands and or, you know, from elbow to fingertips on the car, it etched the papillary lines into the finish of the car. Now, I was there with this, and they actually did it to a couple of cars. This is somebody else because Billy does not have a left hand. And they smudged up a couple of cars with their funny chemistry here. And it was kind of, I think you could just say, a kind of capricious thing. They knew they would create a strange effect.
What is that picture of a hood of?
This is a hood of a little Subaru.
I thought,
Right.
this was an
Little old Subaru. And that remained etched into the finish of the car for at least 4 years. Because every time I looked back, they were still there through all the Swiss winters and summers and everything else. And then the kid moved away. I don't know what happened. Linda Moulton Howe, some of you know her from all of her cattle mutilation stuff. So she contacted me and she said, well, could I bring scientists over to examine this? And I said, yes. Billy said, you may, but please don't destroy the car. Well, she never showed up, of course, because it's a lot easier to sell theoretical, hyper-hysterical, absolute BS that's done by our military and pan it off as extraterrestrial, alien nonsense, instead of actually going and finding out what's happening with a still ongoing UFO contact case that has now been running for over 76 years. So we come back to this early statement about the confirmed existence of extraterrestrial life. Confirmed contact. So indeed, if anybody here thinks, well, you know, so-and-so's got this extraterrestrial case, well, see if they have any evidence that is even remotely comparable. And of course, after almost 40 years doing this researching, you know, I know that nobody does, and I'd be glad to see it if they did. And this is my perspective, my position on it. This is what the UFO cover-up is solely about at this time. Most UFOs, not all, most are secret military craft. Most from this country, but there are other countries and groups, including in South America, other places, that have alternative craft. They are not true interplanetary, let alone interstellar. And many of us who've seen craft, most of the time what we're seeing is terrestrial stuff. Let's see if we can hear Billy in this.
My name is Edward Albert Meier, but all around the world I am simply called Billy. I received the name in Tehran when I was on the road, and since then this name has remained with me. I'd say in and of itself, my childhood was very good and very pleasant for me. I learned very much on the one hand because of my parents, and on the other hand because of an extraterrestrial called Spock, whom I got to know in 1942.
How old were you then?
I was 5 years old. And this man, Svav, taught me very much of my school knowledge, besides many other things, just as Pastor Emanuel Zimmerman did. Then I confided in the pastor, and he told me I did not need to be afraid. He explained to me what telepathy is.
Okay. This is hard for a lot of people to accept. But from the play iron as well, and other people who investigate have never seen any actual evidence of anything that can be verified as being of extraterrestrial origin and manufacture, especially in things like abductions. Are there some people that have various kinds of implants? Yeah, but that doesn't make it extraterrestrial. As Billy has said to me, we've had various technologies on Earth for many years, decades, that the public knows nothing about. And of course, it's to create fear, so that we'll be afraid of anything from outside the Earth, and we will project onto it the insane characteristics and violence and aggression that we manifest for ourselves handily enough on Earth without help from anybody else.
So a question.
Yes?
Are there, would you say, well, let's put it this way, would you say that there are many types of extraterrestrial? Or is there particularly one that's...
According to the information from Meier and the alleged, if you really want to play on, there are many different kinds of extraterrestrials, but they are not on our planet. They are not contacting people here. They're not abducting people. Have there been actual extraterrestrial abductions? Yes, they've said there have been about a handful over a 200-year period of contact exams. Are there hostile races? Of course. Everything in the universe, you know, it's light and dark, positive, negative, good and bad. But we're also being observed by another race that's divided into 3 groups and one other group. And the other group, according to what the Pleiadians have been able to find out, are future Earth time travelers observing us now. There's not a lot more information on that. But as for all sorts of other alien types, the actual history, according to this, of extraterrestrials coming to Earth goes back over 22 million years. Comings and goings, some groups staying for a while, leaving, some being stranded, and then even regressing evolutionarily into a tribal state, forgetting their true origins once their technology had failed and they can no longer move off of the Earth. Now you're in a very primitive times, going back tens, hundreds of thousands of years and more. Some races did the dip and start to slowly come back and follow up again, but none had remembered their own true origins. That's, according to this information. The disinformation experts on Earth, above top secret, MUFON, major disinformation organization, Open Minds TV, you can read these for yourself, I'm sure. The latest one I put in there, To the Stars Academy. All of this is done to create hysteria, fear, entertainment, distraction, disinformation, and to keep people away from finding out about this because of what's in this case, which we haven't yet really touched on, which we will. And what I'll say is this, are you guys good for maybe 10 or 15 minutes more before we take a break, or not? Yeah? Okay, we'll go for it. So the distractions include things like Roswell, which was a real event. Roswell was a crash where the androids were what was recovered. They're not the extraterrestrials. So the grays that everybody hears about were modeled more on those androids, and there is no species of grays going around. There's no extraterrestrials that are working for the U.S. government. Area 51, they carry their lunch trays around underneath the desert. No. Any group, I mean, think about it. If you have a true space and possibly even time-traveling race, long-lived beings, by virtue of what it takes to discover, perfect, and create true space travel, not just to get around your solar system and then into your galaxy and then farther, they need long lifespans, as we will ultimately, eventually regain for ourselves. This was screwed with long ago. But these beings, if they can come here, if they can get here and hover around, they don't need our government's permission to float Aunt Edna and Uncle Joe through the walls, if that was happening. All of this stuff, I'll get you in 1 second, sir. All of this stuff about agreements with the government is absolute baloney. That's the way we think. It's not the way an advanced race thinks. Oh, can we work with and for the U.S. government? The group that bombs the hell out of everybody on the planet because it wants to. What a great group to align ourselves with.
They're all aliens.
Yeah, right. Sir, question for you.
Are these carbon-based, and do they have DNA?
To the best of my knowledge, the answer would be yes, of course, to both. And there is a little more information about genetic modifications that were done to our far distant ancestors by an extraterrestrial human race in the Sirian star system 22 million years ago. And those modifications we've inherited on Earth. I'll tell you what they are. They are the propensity for increased violence and aggression, that's right, and shortened lifespans. The natural human lifespan that we would otherwise have, which some of the so-called biblical folks still have at a time, would be in the hundreds of years. The lifespans were shortened for this particular genetically modified human race in the Sirian star system that was deliberately modified to create warriors for a race was highly advanced and decided it wanted to have nothing to do any longer with aggression and fighting, and genetically modified themselves to such a degree they no longer have their own fighting spirit for survival. So when that is going to attract aggressors, and they're out there in the depths of space, and so they have to quickly get about correcting themselves, but in the meantime, they genetically modified a race, which turns out to be, in many cases, the ancestors for many people on this planet, but the genetic modification has by now been transmitted to virtually every group and every peoples on Earth. So our high point is about 100 to 100 and something plus years, average 72 to 86, whatever. But the aggression, the willingness to fight and flare up is very present, obviously, we can tell. And so much of what this case is really about, we haven't yet gotten into what the case is really about. I said our future survival, but there's something called the spiritual teaching in here that we want to get to, and we will. So I call it the UFO IC, the UFO community and industry, which is what 99% of what you come upon online and in every other form is. It's an industry, it's made to profit people, it's not made to find the truth. Because if MUFON, for instance, I happen to know the guy who's the president of MUFON, I've spoken with him, and he's told me he knows the Meier case is authentic. But it's too good to be true. They have all sorts of excuses. The real excuse is what I call the empty room. Because if any of these people, the so-called UFO experts who don't know a damn thing, none of them, unless they read the Meier material, yeah, have there been sightings of things? So what? We can all cite things. The empty room is what happens if these people have the integrity, the honesty, and the responsibility to humankind to tell the truth and to say, go look at the Meier material. That's where the real thing is. Who knows who Stephen Greer is? Yeah. 10, 12 years ago, I personally, at an event, on the same panel with him, I said, Stephen, I'll give you everything in the Meier case. You know, you've got all these nice people that you parade forward who've seen these things. They don't know what they're seeing, whether it's from here or elsewhere, and they're all, I believe they've all seen things. I've seen things, you've seen things. I said, but why don't you take the Meier case where we've got all this documentation? He would not even look in my direction. It was great. He just sat there as if it wasn't happening. Another profiteer, a huckster who probably started off with great intention and now sells bogus, multi-$100 contact in the desert, shine your flashlight so the aliens will know where you are. Haven't we yet figured out that if an extraterrestrial could get here, wanted to contact anybody, we wouldn't have to go looking for them in the desert? Why don't you look for them in New York City? I mean, it just makes as much sense. So with MUFON, they've been almost 60 years in existence. They couldn't discover the Meier case. Why? Well, Kenneth Smith from Orbital, he's got a friend. And his friend, they tried to recruit him into MUFON. This guy was a former federal agent. Most of MUFON's public information was intentionally bogus or redacted. The US State Department and the CIA basically controlled this activity. This guy, they tried to recruit him into MUFON. He started to ask questions because they figured, well, you know, he's top secret, and he'll want to know. So the MUFON guy told him this stuff. And he said, I'm not interested in joining that organization. I work for a credible, aerospace industry, and you're telling me you...
Is that 2016?
Hold on. Please do a little hand raise so I don't lose you here.
Is that 2016?
Billy Meier was warned about MUFON in 1953, 16 years before it came into existence. We have that in a document too. So with this whole thing with MUFON, They are feeding information. The people that are the MUFON investigators, you know, it's like people that want to feel important, you can join MUFON and run around and you'll be a field investigator. All you're doing is field research for the secret military program, so they can look at your photos and your films and all and say, okay, so we tested that and that's how it appears. Now we need to work on this, so we need to work on that. I mean, this is how cynical it really is. The Pentagon, as you may have heard in the last few months, they spent $110 million over, I don't know, 5 years. They couldn't find the Meier case. How come? You're finding it today for free. Some of you have heard about it before. Why couldn't they find Billy Meier? SETI? I've written to these people. Every one of them is a joker. They're searching for extraterrestrial intelligence. Here it is. There's one guy with SETI. Well, when we finally are contacted by extraterrestrials, they will no doubt speak the language of math to us. It'll be universal. Well, it turns out that language of math isn't quite so universal. There's different maths represented in different ways. But I wrote to them, I said, well, you know, they're already talking to Meier in German. Don't you think that if they're really smart enough to get here, they might be able to learn our languages just like we do? For 76 years, they're talking to this kid to man in German, and it's all transcribed, and all the stuff you can't find, and you can't discover. We've already published it. Exopolitics. I don't know if you've heard about this group, another disinformation organization. Personally, spent time, hours, trying to get them to allow the Meier case to be presented and to be investigated. Every excuse they could possibly come up with. Basically, no. We know it's real, but it's not time for it yet. We have to send faxes to Washington about the UFO cover-up. This is what is going on, folks, to keep you from the truth. Because if you find the truth, and you start to think through this, it's like, whoa, let's clear away all this other stuff. This is a little different than I thought. You know, forget UFOs. I tell people, after, you know, we go through this, okay, UFOs, now just forget about UFOs, because you're not going to be able to do a darn thing with them. You do something with the material and the information. All these people, they're neither competent nor intelligent enough. No, they're deliberately suppressing it. I know that firsthand. The higher standard of proof here, the prophetically accurate information. Svarth, Meier's teacher in 1946, tells him the main causes of the, have we all heard now of climate change? 72 years ago, young little Meier there, 9 years old, is being instructed that there will be mass climate change, climate destruction, triggered basically by overpopulation, the entire Earth, the ecosystem, whatever you like, climate, the atmosphere, and nature, and the whole planet, up to its very foundations, will be destructively included. It's great that we recycle, but if we realize the magnitude, and there's so much information here, Meier's warned about climate change, global warming, the melting of the glaciers, the rising sea, decades before we discover it. And of course, then an organization is founded to fight these things. They don't know what they're doing. In 46, Meier also was told about worldwide terrorism, the refugee immigrant problems, financial collapse. There's more information about that, recently published by Meier, when you find out what's coming within a fairly short time. Environmental destruction, widespread racism, all of this at its core. Too many people vying for resources, fighting with the strife, wars, waste. Food gets suppressed, can't grow. The environment is polluted, the waters, everything. Now, this is one that's very sensitive for a lot of people about immigrant, refugee problems. And we've been hammering on this for a while. Let's see where it is here. Okay, well, we'll get back to them. In 48, he's told all about space satellites. The first moon landing hoax never happened. He publishes this, he's told it here in 48, like, what is it, 21 years before it supposedly happens. In 58, he publishes his own letter explaining the hoax and the 4 or 5 subsequent actual moon landings. He's told about the Kennedy assassination, the Gulf Wars, Islamist terrorism, all this stuff. The EU dictatorship and the US will go and try to provoke Russia into a world war. Anybody paid attention to what happened last night? Rampant child abuse, giant sea quakes, tsunamis, the calderas erupting in Italy, Germany, and the US, meaning Yellowstone, all this is coming. The process of earthquake and volcanic eruption destruction in central Italy, foretold decades ago, is now underway. You can look it up online. Central Italy, lots of shake and bake. We will see the eruption of Mount Etna, Stromboli, Mount Marsili, Vesuvius, and the Campi Flegrei caldera. Then in northern Germany, the Eiffel Fields. And here in the US, we're reading about it already. Yellowstone is starting to brew. It's overdue significantly. These are warnings that have been issued, well, given to Meier when he was a child, and then published subsequently by him at different times. When Spath talks about the supervolcano, you probably can't read it here. Also the caldera, that is to say the supervolcano Phlegraean Fields in Italy, Campi Flegrei, is already making itself more and more noticeable in order to tear open the earth in distant time. Wait a minute, this is Spath from like 1940-something or other telling him this. Everything will continue to an increasing extent, the signs of which will be the great earthquakes in central Italy, they're underway, which will be the beginning of the phase of the fulfillment of those happenings which will bring many catastrophes and much terribleness and much suffering, hardship, misery, and destruction over the earth. Now, let me throw this thought in. There's a lot of warning in here about specific things. Some have already happened, some haven't. It's not the intention of either me or the people in this case to bum everybody out. Prophecies basically are warnings about things that will happen if human beings do not alter their ways. Some cases, the events are, let's say, outside of man-made causes. Most of this stuff has been set in motion through human activity and behavior. You won't get anybody in the sciences that'll talk about it. They won't acknowledge this. It's like no matter what events happen, I send information showing published documents foretelling the specific thing. Can't get any responses.
You talk about like the wrath of God.
No. We will get into the thing about God and all of that in a second.
I was just saying it might have to do with the removal of the oil.
Well, that's another thing. Meier was specifically warned in 1976 that the extraction of petroleum, natural gas, the mining of ores, all this stuff is devastating to the planet because with all the oil, petroleum that's sucked out of the earth and natural gases, we imbalance the tectonic plates. We can't replace those caverns with something of the same viscosity. Seawater and all this water isn't the same thing. That stuff is there to buffer the plates. It's a natural secretion of the planet. In addition to whatever remnants of biological material from decaying plants and fossil, old creatures that were here, there's a secretion. The planet makes it. We have ripped this out, so we've set in motion the conditions for massive quakes. There are some that will affect areas north of here, which now, strangely enough, after Meier publishes it, years later, Oregon State University concludes the same thing about a coming megaquake and tsunamis in the Cascadian Fault. That wasn't published first by our scientists. It's published first by Meier in 2005. A 9.0 quake will run for 5 straight minutes at 9.0. Shake and bake. And then a tsunami comes in, massive one, and then another quake, another tsunami. Cascadian selection zone. We know that that's, there's a guy named Dutch Sintz who's on the internet with predicting stuff, and he's seen certain patterns developing. Even he won't look at the environment. I mean, it's just funny how odd people are about it. But I mentioned to you that Meier had some little ventures in time, and we will get to the specific thing about his trip to San Francisco in the future when he observes it. But this is about as the time fulfills in Italy. But also in the south of Europe, the all-transforming consequences will be enormous when the volcanoes of Mount Etna, Vesuvius and Stromboli, as well as the submarine largest active volcano of Europe, Mount Marsili, off the coast of Italy, together with about 24 further submarine volcanoes in the Mediterranean begin to erupt. We don't yet know about the extent that Meier was told about of submarine volcanoes around the Earth. Those will become active. you know, there's a lot here. Maybe we need to take a little break, but you know, don't get depressed, and you know, and drown yourself in bubbling water, or whatever you do. We're going to have the real reason more about where we're going in this and why. Why the warnings? Why all of this stuff was told to Meier? Why he's been publishing it himself since he was 14 years old with the help of school teachers? Why he sent thousands of letters around the world to scientists, universities, and people to get only one response ever. I think it was from the West Germans who said, "Thank you." That was it. So the consciousness in the world, to a large degree, doesn't want to allow this information to come in. And because it's been suppressed, and it is actively suppressed today through very, very high technology. As a matter of fact, there's a new translation, not a translation, well, there's a new article online, still in German, from Switzerland, about a group that has an enormous technology with which they use computers, cell phones, everything you can think of, any device, radio, TV, to beam out highly negative impulses to people, to suppress, to mislead, to create fear and anxiety and all. And they even attack Meier's computers in Switzerland. He was told this by his extra... I may tell you the story about his IT from outer space, it's really fun. But he has people that have analyzed his technology from a, I call it a higher perspective, because they can. And there is a group on Earth that for at least 50 years has been involved in actively making sure this material doesn't come out. Because it leads to the liberation of people's thinking for themselves. We're no longer afraid of sky daddies and gods and devils and demons and all the other creations of the human mind, nor are we going to then continue to follow false leaders who every damn time just are in it for themselves and set countries into chaos and destruction and what have you. And there's information in the case about Clinton, there's information in here about Trump, there's all sorts of stuff. We will get through it. How about we take a little break for your own relief here? You want to ventilate, hydrate, whatever. And yes, before you get up, yes?
I was just going to say you could mention the workshop in spiritual teaching.
You know what, when you come back, we're going to go through some more information, but we'll try to spend a little time towards the end of it. For those who want to put into practice one of the things that the Pleiadians recommend we learn to do for our own sovereignty, solidity, consciousness, evolution, etc. Because this case is about, at the core, 100% self-responsibility, not looking outside of ourselves. Forget about ETs coming to save us and demons, saints, aliens, forget it. Just like forget about the UFOs. Once you're satisfied, okay, UFOs. This is about us taking complete responsibility. And the next important part, there's the 3 steps here that are important. The second step is we must see things as they are, not as we prefer, not as we fear, as they are, and then to learn neutral positive thinking. Not hyper-happy New Age Band-Aid thinking, but neutral positive thinking, whereby we learn to discern how to see what things are and how to change them in preferred ways so that according to the immutable universal law of cause and effect, we are moving forward in a deliberate way in our individual and collective lives. And in time, we will have a world like that, but it's going to take some time. So we'll take a break. I hope you'll come back for the second half, and feel free to look at things. If you have any questions about DVDs or books or anything there, feel free.
About the spacesuit, it looked like Spock was wearing that spacesuit.
Right.
I was just curious if, obviously if they don't have it on here, they're breathing our atmosphere, but I mean, why would he have that if he doesn't need it to breathe here?
Well, he wasn't wearing the helmet, but their suits also are very advanced and have other functions. So they would wear certain suits that may contain certain technology for them as well, in case something happens to them, like somebody knocks over their photos. Yeah.
So that there would be an occasion to put a globe on their head.
Yeah,
maybe
if they go
sometimes.
to a planetary body or something, maybe not even inhabited, like they took Meier to Mars once, and he and Ptah did a little walk around the Olympus Mons or something, and so they have to have protective gear on for that.
With air, they can breathe the atmosphere
Oh yeah,
inside
so
there.
their technology would be extremely advanced. Their ships have certain types of technology for detecting gases in different conditions and whether it's safe to. The windows will change colors under certain conditions and stuff. So you might imagine that since they're about 8,000 years ahead of us technologically, and technology isn't simply a linear progression, it's exponential. You know, we know in 100 years we've gone from, you know, what, to computers and space. So their outfits, their craft, everything is very deliberately created, and their craft are controlled generally, at least in part mentally, by the person that's attuned on a private craft. I don't know about the big one where Ptah has what's called a big spacer that is about 10 miles in diameter. It's a huge thing. It's like they even have a part on it where it's nature, where it's like trees and grasses, and I mean, it's beyond sci-fi in a way, you know. I mean, clearly, when you get into all of this kind of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Sure. Sir, you had a question.
I'm imagining you're pointing at me.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
But what happened last night that we were supposed to be conscious of?
Oh, what happens at the, well, you know that the United States launched a missile attack against Syria, retaliation they called it. I don't remember the Syrians attacking us, though. I was looking for it and I couldn't find what we were retaliating for. You know, it must be said, first of all, in connection with this case, and actually in my own life, they are not political. They are equal opportunity offenders. They can find something bad to say about all of us on earth, as well as good things to say too. But there's nothing, but politics is a partisan viewpoint, you know, and that is one of the things that cripples us intellectually on the planet. And I've noticed that even, you know, just when I look at things, if we were principle-oriented and we were determining what the real true principles and values of human life are, we could disagree on how to get there, but we wouldn't withhold support and everything else because someone on the other side came up with it. You know, politics is so illogical, and I remember hearing when I was younger people say, politics is the art of the possible. And I said, no, it's the art of advantage. It's always advantage-based. There's always a lie involved, always lying. That's diplomacy, it's politics, and they've held the same point of view. They just said, you know, you people are insane. You are destroying yourselves, and you polarize through politics and advantage, and just about anybody you elect. It's, you know, there's corruption all the way through, and believe me, the stuff they've got to say about this country ain't pretty. But it's either true or it isn't, and people have to decide that for themselves. But if we, and you know, it may offend people, but you know, in the context of this information, politics and religion basically trap us. We are enslaved by belief systems instead of liberated by truth and knowledge. And that's where all of this leads to. If people choose, if they're interested in that, they can examine that and decide for themselves. So for right now, does anybody else have a question right now? Yes, sir.
I have two questions.
Two
One
questions.
is there any connection or acknowledgement of a shift of consciousness since the 2012 solstice? And my second question is, if this is the only verified UFO contact, why are they only contacting Billy Meier and not hundreds of others?
Okay, great questions. They don't refer to a 2012 consciousness shift. What they've said is they recognize and acknowledge that we're, you know, in a maybe a third of a part way into the Aquarian age that they see as really beginning in about 1844, and that, you know, we are now in those, under the influence of those vibrations, that kind of development, which will have, it's got positive and negative like everything. You know, it's tremendous advances in technology, and it can be used for good or for ill, and a lot of, you know, imagination and creation and creativity. But the whole thing really directs itself, the whole case directs itself towards the evolution. Well, I'll put it this way, I'll just jump to saying, in that thing where we saw Billy sitting at the table, it's from our film, The Silent Revolution of Truth, and in the film, Billy says, the meaning of life is the evolution of consciousness. And that says an awful lot. I mean, that's an upward spiral that there's no limiters set on. And that when you get into the cosmology, if you will, that is presented here, what is the creation? You know, this gentleman mentioned, you know, is it God's will or this? Billy asked them, when he was in his earlier stages of his contacts, the official contacts in the 70s, do people have God in your world and all that? What's that about? And they said, we don't use that term because we know what it means. And they said, what? They said, God always referred to, in every language, as a matter of fact, there's a 4-letter word, and it all has the same values, apparently, numerologically and all. Anyway, it always referred to the more advanced extraterrestrial beings, human, who were here, lording it over the primitive Earth humans, in some cases interbreeding, and in most cases screwing things up for us badly by encouraging this devotion, the fear, the manipulations, and this goes back a very long way. And there was even, up until 1978, one of the extraterrestrial groups was still based on the planet that was behind all religions in terms of controlling people through, it wouldn't matter what religion, all the agendas were for control. And to create a one-world religion that then everybody would believe and be controlled by. Those people were removed from the planet due to certain circumstances that finally allowed the Pleiaren to do it. They couldn't otherwise because it would have been a violation and all that. So the evolution of consciousness, because what we call spirituality, they said, there's something called the spiritual teaching, which is the core of the case. It's not the UFOs, it's not the prophecies, it's the spiritual teaching, but these things lead us to it. So in the spiritual teaching, what we're learning through the study is we're not yet really in a place where we can learn spirituality. We have to continue to evolve our consciousness to the place where we are then bridging over into true spirituality, but that still comes somewhere in the distant time. It's fine, we call it the spiritual teaching, the teaching of spirit, the teaching of life, you know, it's wonderful. But when we read and study that, we realize what the work at hand is for us now on earth in this time and for a long time to come. And if we decide to embrace that study and test it, it's really like there's no beliefs. This is a belief-free, non-religious approach to learning. And like anything, like if you want to study computers, you want to study car mechanics, you have an instructional, you look, you read, you learn, and you test it out. You know, what happens when you put A into B? You know, oops, wrong thing. So if it's a good teaching in any area, you can test it out and keep progressing through it through your own personal responsibility, experience and learning, gained knowledge and wisdom. And that's what this is. So some people may say, I don't know, I don't like to read it. That's fine. It's not mandatory. It's optional and it's available, and it's not, it doesn't take a, you know, quote unquote rocket scientist to read it, because as they say, like Billy said to them, how come, you know, when you're telling me about these scientific things, we'll go through a few more before we get right into the spiritual thing. How come you're not using some more scientific terms? And they said, it seems that it's only on Earth your scientists want to create a hierarchy where they separate themselves and make themselves above everybody, so they create a rarefied language for it. The truth can be expressed simply and clearly so anyone can understand it. If we tell you that this, you know, is this thing, you understand what we're saying, and you can determine it, and then your scientists discover that, quote unquote, means they corroborate what we've told you in whatever language they dress it up in, The truth is the truth. It's right there. It's evident. So there's nothing here that's meant to create a hierarchy in terms of, well, I'm more advanced in my understanding of this. Billy has an article, it's called To Be of Equal Value. And it's very refreshing because he's saying, look, in the creation, in this universe, this thing that we're really in, that's given life and order and laws of operation to everything, it's an impersonal, it's not a deity. It's a consciousness and yet a structure, and it doesn't have any chosen people, only begotten Son, solitary prophet. It isn't here to create hierarchy or to favor. It does not intercede in your life. So when people say, with good intention, well, I was doing this and the universe brought me this thing or that, yeah, but no. It's not like, oh, wait a minute, did I qualify? Yes, says the universe. I'm now giving you this thing because you're a good boy. It doesn't happen like that. There's laws that apply to everything in life. We know, okay, this material, whatever it is, has a certain duration. It's made of materials that have a certain atomic and molecular structure. This is a different one. This material may not last as long as this material, but everything is held in perfect order by an initial thought, if you will, of this birth, self-birth creation. Wait a minute. All of this is done as creation. It may still be expanding and growing, but the laws of operation are immutable. There are higher laws that we may not yet know about, but they don't violate laws. We're not suddenly going to start floating in our heads because gravity is automatically changing itself out. Is there anti-gravity? Yes, but that doesn't mean that there isn't gravity, if you follow me. So when we are living in accordance with the way life really works, the laws of creation, we find that our lives generally, not that without struggle or mistake, but we keep getting an improvement in the quality of the life that we live. And it's not through belief. They say beliefs are simply the absence of evidence and truth and proof. Find out what is in reality so that you know something. And we all know very little relative about this, truly what life is. And they say, well, look, we know many things, but we don't know everything by a long shot. There are beings that are above us in evolution, and we are moving towards that. So we, meaning them, as a more highly developed human race, have a self-obligation to our younger brothers and sisters to assist them to assist themselves up the ladder of evolution without interference. When a race has attained a true space traveling capability, we may openly contact them if they want our presence and interaction. But when a race like yours is still very earthbound, multitudes of people bound into many different belief systems and such violence and aggression going on all over, all we are allowed to do is to insert information into your world that you may find it. And while it may seem strange to find one man in Switzerland who's now, older guy there, I like to say it this way, and then I'll get you a question. Yeah. That this Meier is said to be the seventh and final prophet. It's not a celebrity slot. You know what happens to people that come around to tell truths. They get shot at, nailed up, or hacked to pieces, whatever. So this time they figured, well, this is my version of it. Let's see, we got one more shot at it. This is the seventh time. I know we don't want to start another religion. We don't want a cult to form. So how about by the time people are finding this guy, he's a late middle-aged, pot-bellied, gray-bearded, one-armed Swiss farmer. Perfect. You know, that's the guy. Hello. You know, nobody's going to get all excited and start bowing down and creating kooky stuff. So the reason behind that, it's said in this case, which I cannot prove, is that since, according to the teaching, the human spirit, not what we call the soul, which is something else, transitory. The human spirit is the eternal, immortal, undying aspect of every human being. It's not a personality. It is, if you will, the battery and the part piece, the hologram of the creation, of the universe itself, meant to evolve through countless reincarnations as new and different personalities each time in life, not remembering the past lives. We can't be burdened with what we did or didn't do last time. On an upward spiral of evolution till we are evolved enough to be able to know and handle information from previous lifetimes so that we aren't overwhelmed either with fear or joy or love or intoxication of any form. Meier's spirit is said to be enormously ancient and has performed this function as the previously aforementioned 6 prophets before him as those personalities, and this is the final time. In all of the incarnations as a person and the reincarnations of the spirit, he hasn't been some big mucky-muck, a prophet, blah, blah, blah. Many just more mundane. He's been musicians and composers, all sorts of different things, as we all are in the course of evolution. So he was one of the people chosen for this and the most suitable because his spirit had this ancient connection and the potential for this current personality to fulfill the role of this contactee prophet.
They're also saying that he writes the spiritual teaching for them.
That's another thing. I'm going to tell that story in a quick second, but I wanted to make sure I got your question.
Yeah, I just want to kind of sidetrack. I don't want to sidetrack you, but question is, do we have the technology to shoot these things down if we,
Okay, I'll give you 2 seconds on that. Some of the crashes were apparently done because of radar influence or whatever. Some things probably we may have some technology to take down certain craft. I think any extraterrestrials that are actually aware of this world, and remember they have a lot of technology to look into a lot of things, would make sure that they are not vulnerable any longer to such technologies as we may have. It's not the most important part, but Carter had just raised the point about the spiritual teaching for the Pleiaren. First, Meier writes the spiritual teaching for us, meaning he doesn't author it all. There are certain things he authors from his own person and experience and access to information. Much of the rest of the spiritual teaching he is able to take out of what's called the storage banks. You've heard the term Akashic Records, which isn't quite accurate, but it's close enough that we could understand that all information is stored somewhere kind of etherically, and his abilities as this spirit's personalities have had over time, can access information. So he literally takes dictation, like books like The Might of the Thoughts, The Way to Live, The Goblet of the Truth, The Sight, amazing books. And they are taken directly from the teaching of creation itself. And they are meant for all human races to be able to have access to, here's how it works. Now, I was with Billy, this goes back now almost probably 10 years, wait a minute, 2000, yeah, more than that. I think 14 years is when this happened the first time. I'm in his office, 12 years ago. And I was sitting with him, we were talking about something, I happened to look over, and he has a laser printer there. It was a new printer, he finally was on a computer and all this. And so the printer had all these pieces of paper coming out, they were all there like a bad haircut and sticking out. And I look over and he goes, oh yeah. He says, I write the spiritual teaching also for the Pleiaren, and Quetzal has to always come here and beam down into my office and go over and take all the papers and beam back up to his ship and then go back to the Pleiaren civilization. They realize this is too time consuming. So now they did something with my computer, so all I have to do is write the teaching out and then type in, and it goes to a separate disk through a server to something and it's transmitted directly over there. And then he says, but something isn't quite right, and it's going to be fixed so I can do this because Zaphanat Paneak is coming in a couple of weeks to fix my computer to do that. Okay, so I think so now you're telling me you have an IT from outer space. Okay, well, I don't even have one from Earth. That's why I have computer problems. So I came back in about 6 months, and I thought, I'm not going to see if this guy's just putting me on, right? So I said, Billy, how's your computer, with the type, oh, yeah, he says, Zafan, not Panea King. He fixed my computer because, you see, I write the spiritual teaching for the Pleiaren. Quetzal always has to come in. Same thing, just like that. And he says, but he fixed that, but he screwed something else up on the computer. He's got to come back to fix it. And go, oh my gosh, okay. So there were a total of 3 times where I had come back on visits, total a couple of years later, And I would ask them each time just to see if I'm going to trip them up, because I feel I have that responsibility. If I'm going to do this, represent this material, I want to know that I'm dealing, I have no reason to not, but I'm going to try to really vet this guy as much as I can. I have never found him to tell me something that wasn't true. And I've never found anything in the material that turned out to be false, a falsehood, a lie. There are things I cannot prove from the far distant past or the as yet unarrived future. But in the past, let's say dozen years even, we have found, as I've said, over 200 specific things Meier's told that have been corroborated. Not as new, they're new discoveries to our scientists, but they're not new, and they're not new to me and other people. And this will keep on happening. It's probably even this week. If we go online somewhere, there's another one, because they're always happening. So with that, I'll jump to some of this. I've bolded a few things, because back in '51, not only is Meier warning about the increases in the storms and frequency and violence of them, and floods and blizzards, he's talking about damage to the ozone layer. In 1951, he's talking about unnatural climate change. That's man-made climate change. 51, 58, 64. Rising global temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, glacial melting, climbing sea levels, extreme weather, all of this stuff. Pandemic, diseases, food and water shortages are coming, folks. Disputes over refugee resources. 51, 58, 64. Hike. Oh yeah, this is what the Pentagon came out with in 2014. They call it their climate change threat multiplier. In case you can't tell, they're exactly what Meier verifiably published up to 63 years before. He's 14 years old and he starts publishing this stuff. And the third millennium, when big parts of the continents disappear, that's yet to come. And he talks about all the natural disasters, that people will again rebuild in places that they shouldn't because they forget too quickly. Phantasmagoria through movies and television, as they later, because they're creating this, which we already now have, we can't tell what's real and what isn't anymore. You've got CG, all this stuff. They later will, through a worldwide interconnecting of computers and electronics. What do we call that today?
Twitter, Facebook.
Election.
How about the internet? Work with me. It isn't Al Gore who first created. They deceive themselves and see things that don't exist. Their sense for reality disappears, whereby they lose themselves more and more and become more and more malleable and manipulative. Terrorists will spread murder and destruction worldwide. 1958, an unimagined impending asylum seeker problem breaking over the industrialized countries, going to have high levels of asocial immigrants who release a crime wave that's already flooding through Europe and here too, folks, if we are honest with ourselves. And I don't mind going into explaining that if you need it. This is what I talked about before with the earthquakes and all this stuff. The earth collapses in on itself. Can you say sinkhole? That's what this stuff is. If you look, this guy Dutchson's, when he shows where all the fracking is going on the earth and everything, there's always sinkholes, earthquakes. Oklahoma, a mega center of petroleum extraction. They're having earthquakes galore. In 58, Meier specifically, in addition to the 2 U.S.-Iraq Gulf Wars, the second one of which will be led by a president who's the son of a former president. That's in there from 58. The Bushes. Radical Islamist terrorism is foretold along with fall of Berlin Wall, AIDS by name, plastic credit cards, portable telephones, the internet, hoax first. I mean, as he said, and it will be that fanatical Islamists, not Muslims. These are people who are not true Muslims. They're just psychopaths who want to kill under the name, so they go under that. Carry out bloody revenge on the distant descendants of the Christians for their earlier crusades when they accomplished their deadly and destructive acts through irrepressible terror all over the world. You have to pay attention to what's coming, folks, because it is. I'm going to skip through.
Das wird weltweit sich greifen, wenn nicht endlich wirklich etwas getan wird, das greifend ist. Die einzige Lösung wäre eigentlich eine multinationale Friedenskampftruppe. Das ist das Einzige, das wirksam ist, denn nur da unten die Syrer und die Iraker gegen den IS, die können rein nichts ausrichten. Und mit dem Bombardement, das die Amerikaner veranstalten, da unten wird auch nichts gebracht. Das ist nur Geldmacherei. Jede Bombe kostet sehr viel Geld, die sie runterschmeißen. Dadurch wächst die Waffenindustrie, macht Profite und damit hat es sich. Aber es ist nichts damit getan, um den IS aufzulösen.
The actual number of IS terrorists already in Europe and already in the United States is extremely high, the sleepers. We have not seen the end of that by a long shot, and unfortunately, things like last night, this further bombardments of Americans, this only antagonizes.
Der Terrorismus greift weltweit sich mit dem IS, genauso wie mit Al-Qaida. Nur noch viel schlimmer. Wir haben noch nie, seit Menschengedenken, haben wir noch nie einen solchen Terrorismus gehabt, mit so derartiger Morderei und Zerstörung, wie es der IS macht. Es hat diese Beziehung noch niemals in diesem Rahmen gegeben.
Okay, so basically that is going to still be a worldwide problem of enormous magnitude because terrorism is a tactic. It's not something you can fight against really. You can try to prevent things, but it's a tactic. It's guerrilla warfare, for another term. The point of all this stuff, which I can, all of these things that have been specifically foretold, which wasn't necessarily the case throughout all of history, where we knew, this was in 1987, Meier publishes, the Russians will move their troops to Arkhangelsk. In 2012, the Russians moved their troops to Arkhangelsk. We've had this published. This kind of stuff, the fall of France that's coming from radical Islam.
But Arkhangelsk was a Russian territory. That's a Russian territory.
Yes, that's right.
So if they moved
specifically to a location where they are under year-round cloud cover to prepare for attacks against Scandinavia and the attack that will come against the U.S. should we keep on provoking the Russians. I got to lecture twice at Northern Arizona University at the invitation of a skeptical professor, and I had sent him the information on the attacks in Paris beforehand. And so on November 15, when those attacks came, the next day he wrote me to say that this is what, he said more on this later, but guess what the first thing I said to Laureen, who was his wife?
Get out.
Yeah.
He spells it the same way.
There we go. When we first heard about the Paris bombings, I knew this one was on its way, thank you, because I sent him Meier's information. Then, okay. So,
somebody maybe organized it with you.
No, it's not quite that way. A lot of this stuff, and I'm going to move through so we get to the part where we're a little more interactive on the self-responsibility level.
We could go on a little longer.
We can? Okay, good. Then I won't rush, but we'll
we don't
get
have
to
to end it at 4. We can make it longer.
Perfect, for those that want to hang in. All of this stuff about war with Russia is long and specifically foretold, warned against, so that people who decide, what do I do as a human being to help certain things not occur, because it's said that it's our responsibility. And here they describe exactly even what happened last night. This is from 1987. In all, America will play the most decisive role when in the guise to strive for peace and to fight against terrorism. It invades many countries of the earth, bombs and destroys everything, and brings thousandfold death. The military politics of the USA will know no bounds. Here's the thing about this. Truthfully, this isn't from 1987. These are the Enoch prophecies. Enoch, we know as Enoch. These prophecies are 10,000 plus years old and were translated into current language so that Billy would understand it in 1987. They identify the different countries. The predictions of Jeremiah are the same. They're ancient. These were the same spirit form as Meier. These were prophets who were able, either through their own consciousness powers or through time travel, to see the future, to warn against it, that we may become, it just keeps on going. American aggression, they're very clear about it. This is about Russian attack on the US and Canada that's coming, if this keeps going. War with Russia. They're talking here, he's talking about computer-controlled weapon systems. Even the fact that this was published in '87. And enormous natural catastrophes. Rolling walls of fire and violent hurricanes will rage all across America. You know what's happened up here. These firestorms, these things have been specifically forewarned of. We can go, I don't know about this and I don't know about that, when you keep on getting one after another and there's hundreds of them, maybe the lights go on for us. We go, well, what do we do? The destruction of the WTC, i.e. the World Trade Center by terrorists, will only be beginning. Published in 1987, originally written more than 10,000 years ago, and described. Okay.
Yeah.
This is one that Meier was taken to see. He took 11 photographs of it. This is the coming earthquake for San Francisco. The investigators got to see 11 photos. I'll go through this quickly. I'm not going to go through all the details, except to say, when they are looking at 11 photos on the table, they're trying to figure out, they're going, well, these aren't paintings. This is San Francisco. There's the Transamerica building. There's this, there's that. When does this happen? Billy says, I'm not allowed to tell you. They look down at the cars in the street in about 1978 is when Billy got on that trip into the future. And Wendell Stevens, Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, U.S. Air Force retired at the time, the cars look different than the cars of today. They're rounder, more like, the Beetle, the Volkswagen Bug. More glass in the windshield. Some of the glass goes right into the roof lines. And there's no external projections for the rear view, side view mirrors outside. Tesla, Toyota, Mercedes, etc. right now are all waiting for permission to put the cameras inside the screens so that the rear view mirrors won't be on all these new cars with all this glass that we see on the streets today and in the coming years. 1978? Nobody was seeing those cars. How would he know? How would he know? So there's information about it there. I'm going over some of the films because all of this is available on my site for free. You can look at it all. And this was the warning that they first gave them in 1975 and again in 2012. The superpower USA could come to an end after 2020 if nothing in this country changes for the better by then. Now, this is worded in a very specific way. Superpower USA stands for United States of America. What you need to know is that Meier, in 1981 and again in 1987, specifically foretold 2 coming civil wars to America. I read the first one from 81 in 86 and I laughed out loud, saying, what's this guy thinking? Civil wars in America? I'm not laughing anymore. We are in already the early stages of the first Civil War. All the polarization, all the crazies acting up on this side, all the crazies acting up on that side. So what leads to civil wars here? Political machinations, ongoing polarization, religion, culture, race, color, this, that, and the other thing. Leftist, extremist violence, which we saw right after Trump was elected, and retaliation from extreme right. Here you go. And everything gets dragged into that. Let's prove the prophecies wrong. That's always been my particular mission, to help prove these things wrong. And the only way I know of doing that is to bring it to public awareness. In 2008, Meier is told, and I have it on my website, Clinton will never become president. she would have unleashed a completely devastating, unprovoked nuclear war with Russia, which deep state, shadow government forces now push Trump to do. Last night, we entered into a whole new phase of insanity where Trump, who said, we're bringing the troops home, we're leaving Syria alone, launches a missile strike. And he does it in a robotic announcement at a podium. And all they have to do is, whenever they were ready, whoever they are, and we know who some are, is to whisper in his ear, nice family, you remember seeing the JFK film? Now this is what you're going to do. It doesn't matter who's sitting in that chair. Trump, certain moronic, what do you call it, agendas, certain which were good. Clinton would have put us all, we'd be crisp. And this is what the play iron told Meier about Trump. In June, before the election, he will become the next president. If Meier reveals this beforehand, because he knows that Billy was going to say, well, can I publish this? He said, no. He'll be killed by the Secret Service people and by Democrats. He's not a Republican. He's a one-man party himself. He's a chaotic and catastrophic human being, but otherwise well-meaning and not bad. He wants peaceful political, military, economical agreement, especially with Russia, who's never done anything to this country, which the left forgot about. Danger from power-hungry schemers, as per Obama, who came into office as the best person to ever occupy the presidency, who got turned into doing all this crazy stuff and drones. And they told Meier, they said, because he asked, what about Obama? Back at the time, he said, well, as a human being, he's the best person to ever sit in that office, and there's a great hope for him. He actually is one of those people on Earth who's connected to this mission from a long time ago, as Gorbachev was. And then by the time his reign of power ended, they said, he was turned like the rest of them. They just got to him. These people that are deeply entrenched, some are public and many are not. Now, what they told him at that time, there will be false post-election machinations from opponents of Trump. That's the Russia thing. Never happened, but they're going to try and get him out of office any way they can. He will change some of his positions that he expressed in the campaign. He's absolutely wrong regarding climate change and healthcare, but could change, maybe. So this is where we go to the idea of principles, looking for right values. It might be somebody, it's the worst person, he's just, but wait, he's espousing something of value, support it. You don't want him in that office? Vote him out. You don't create this kind of thing that is designed to overcome the will of those people who elected him. Just election. We don't like it? Vote him out. But that's not the agenda of the people who feel they are entitled to reign and rule. Because when we really know the backstory on the powers that be in either party, you don't want anything to do with any of them. This is the thing. And in order for this to happen, deceitful machinations will be initiated after the election in order to prove allegedly false election results by which Trump has illegally won his office. However, what will result of this planned deception, this we have not yet fathomed, which is why I cannot give any details of this. It's still in flux, at least as of November of last year.
How come they don't give detail?
There's certain things that they give a lot of details on, other things they hold back so that we work out without relying on, well, the outcome's supposed to be this way, so we're not going to do anything. You say, you don't know. This is a whole thing on America's civil wars. I'm not going to go into it. The only way to avoid them, we've got to promote understanding and seek cooperation. Focus on the common values and study the spiritual teaching. It's not political. It's not religious. There's no beliefs. It liberates one to become their own authority in life. Of course, all authorities have to learn more. And again, what happens after 2020 will depend on those who succeed Obama as their advisors, as president, as advisors, which internal and external policies they pursue. As long as we have the military-industrial complex telling Trump or anybody else in office, you bomb this one, you bomb that. We've got troops in 100+ countries around the world. It's not our business. But cause and effect tells us what's coming here. This is a nice, hopeful moment. In this case, we are told that true peace, the real turning point in our world, will come from the women, what they call the mothers of the new millennium. The women who come in, who come into power to create peace, love, freedom, and harmony. At first there will be some, false leaders in there because everything has that connected to it, but they will come in and put down that despotic rule, that aggression from this overcharged male dominance. The male has its role, the female has its role. We're not meant to be androgynous. There's plus and minus in the universe for reasons. But we've got to understand that women, to truly take their power, they don't start emulating men. It's like, I don't understand why there are women boxers in MMA and they want to be hard bodies. And I used to say to my friends, I don't want to date anybody that can bench press me. It's just like, why can't you just have, females be females, males can be males, and we can get the benefit of that. And that polarization, that opposition is part of the growth. You have to have it. You have to have little conflicts here and there, disagreements, so that evolution and thinking can take place. But it will be the women then who will ultimately be the leaders on Earth. It's a little ways in time in the distance. As a matter of fact, more than a little. This is new from Meier, and this is very important. The USA and the rulers of the USA shall be imperiled in the future in many ways. Goes on to tell from who. So that the US population breaks up into different population groups. That's the Civil War. The imperiling. I think Trump is a target of the imperiled rulers and others, maybe on any and all sides of the aisle. The economy, the wages of the employed will drastically decrease. This is worldwide, and provoke enormous financial problems in all population strata of the working world. This is what we are looking at the beginnings of right now, if you watch the markets and everything, a global financial and economic crisis of such proportions as has never before been seen. Very much trouble coming, scarcity of commodities. This isn't for fear, it's for warning, preparation, thinking.
Stock market's taken.
Even in the USA, the people will be dispossessed. That's a pretty heavy term. As a consequence of the global financial crisis, which will become a pretext for deploying the military and police forces against the angry and partly also heavily armed population. Why do you think there's such pushes now, ever intensifying, to disarm the population? An armed population doesn't roll over for dictatorship. And we won't even get into some of the things about the shootings and who's behind school shootings and other things. I will say that some years ago, Meier wrote that since 2001 to I think 2015, he said, all but 6 of 175 so-called terrorist acts in the US can be traced back precisely to the FBI and the CIA. False flags. Here's the core of our problems. Here we go. These are some of the basic steps. First of all, it is non-religious and belief-free. So each human being takes complete responsibility for themselves. Not that they have to do that in order to partake of the spiritual teaching. It's just that when you do that, you're already, whether you're studying the spiritual teaching or not, you are doing what the most evolutive thing is for yourself from the get-go. You're not being ordered about by hierarchies, religious, political, or otherwise. Cause and effect, understanding that is the immutable law. Everything that we think, we feel, we do, starts as a cause of thought, causal thought, and leads to an effect. Every single thing. Everything that's visible to us in this room, apart from the living life forms, us, if there's a planter, I don't know, this is all thought made manifest. That's what you look around. And we are thought made manifest in a sense too. Everything in our lives is our thoughts made manifest. Whether we are consciously aware or not, which is one of the reasons we are, asked to start to see things exactly as they are, to employ that neutral positive thinking. What is? Not what am I afraid of, what do I want? First, what is? Because we are then learning to control our thoughts, knowing that our thoughts lead to the life we live, to the creation of all of the things, the feelings and our actions, if we are conscious 24/7 if possible, that we are thinking and what we are thinking, even while we're doing other things. If my mouth is moving over here, we're sleeping, we're eating, we're holding hands, whatever it is, we are aware, we're conscious of what we are creating, what we're thinking, because it always leads to feelings don't arise without thoughts. I don't mean a feeling like, ooh, that's sharp. I mean feelings that come from the human being. They only arise from thought. So if we consider that, we don't even have to say we know it. If we consider that, we start to notice, oh, I'm thinking about that. How does that feel? What are the thoughts I have? How does it make me feel? That is a 24/7 option for human beings, because the more we can observe and control our thinking, the more consciously we direct ourselves in life. Doesn't mean we're error-free. Everybody has to make mistakes in the course of evolution. We don't want to make the same ones over and over. So when we're aware of what we're thinking and how we're feeling about it, then we can move things in our consciousness to create better thoughts for better feelings and better actions. It's really, life is simple in that sense. It's not necessarily easy always, but it's simple. So, and that's the reason for all this, the spiritual teaching. So it's the key to our future survival, individually and collectively. That means, I'm reiterating because it is through repetition, we don't have these imaginary beings that are responsible for us. Nobody's responsible for us. If you count out of the trillions of prayers that have been sent skyward over the past thousands of years, you really try to figure out which ones ever got really specifically verifiably answered, other than through some sort of coincidence, synchronicity, or you did it yourself. You go, gee, why am I following that? Okay, once again, seeing things as they really are, control. We're going to do a little process here in a minute, so I'm just trying to prime this pump. Yes?
Well, a prayer is just like a thought.
Well,
so you can create your own reality through your prayers. And especially because the prayers have so much feeling attached to them, which I think is necessary for like a very forceful or successful manifestation.
So if I take the concepts in here, I would say what they say is, yeah, prayer is great if you're not praying to something outside of yourself.
Right.
Praying to your own spirit, your own consciousness to awaken, to bring forward to you that which will serve you best. And
I'm sorry, but don't you think that if you're praying, even if you're praying to God and you think that God is going to come and, mow your lawn or whatever, that it is a thought. It is your picture in your mind. You put so much energy and focus into painting that picture and the energy that goes into it.
But if there's no place that it really gets delivered for efficacy, just to be blunt, if there's no sky daddy, guy in the sky, going, okay, hold on, let's see.
Right, it's your turn to get something.
Here's the thing, and this may be harsh for people that have strong beliefs, but think about it like this. If you say to somebody, is the God of your belief system omnipotent, knows everything, and all that, okay, and made the world, the universe, all that stuff perfect, right? All this stuff is operating, I didn't do it, no, you didn't do it, no, there's God that, then why are we praying to that being? Don't you think that an omnipotent being doesn't need to be reminded, hey, down here, come on, what am I, chopped liver? I want this, I want that. No, it's not necessary. If there's an omnipotent being, it's got it. It knows whether or not you need something, except the fact is that since we're self-responsible and innately equipped with everything to develop in ourselves, to answer our own prayers as best they can ever be answered, that's why, believe me, don't believe me, but consider this. If prayers were really answered, there'd be very few people left on earth because everybody's praying to destroy the next guy. We pray to our God to kill those beings and to win this football game and to, Oh, really? You know, the creation is neutral. It doesn't take sides in wars, in football games. It doesn't have chosen people, solitary prophet, only begotten sons. No. That's why I was saying before, Meier wrote a thing, to be of equal value. All human spirit forms, as different as they are from each other, consider that, trillions of them, they are of equal value. Some human beings, in each lifetime, we are more advanced than someone in this, we're less advanced than that. But intrinsically, we are of the same value. In the viewpoint of the creation, it's simply given us a piece of itself to merge eventually one day back into the creation, which is what this is about. Well, it's a long way off. So there's no favorites. There's nothing, in that sense, the creation is the all-encompassing. We don't need to pray to it. It's done its thing. We should pray to awaken ourselves to what's real. There are ways to draw forward into ourselves, and I'll get into one of them, that which we can bring into practical use in this lifetime from past lives if we know how to program. Because while you said as much emotion and feeling into a prayer, this is also computer. This is also entered into the program, and it is so. This is what we're programming for. Repetition doesn't hurt. Maybe it's fine to have more and more energy into it, but if we are clear about our intention and what we are doing, we don't have to get all charged up and, super passionate. The passion, follow your passion. Well, follow your reason, your desire, your plan. But if we're clear about it, we create it, we institute it, we release it into creation, knowing that the might of the thoughts is how things work. All those evil people out in the world, the so-called elite and everything, they know this. They know how it works, with one exception. They lack the conscience. They lack the compassion. They lack the consciousness of other and service to other, and consequences to others are important. They simply know how to get things. They do this. They ceaselessly move towards their goals, but rather brutally, without consideration to anybody else for it. They know this is the computer. You program your intention, you follow through, you pay attention to what comes your way, you use it to get where you're going. We, who are just generally interested in a slightly more loving kind of an existence, we also get cowed by different beliefs. They're not stuck with those belief systems. They're going to go, yeah, right, okay, keep praying. They're going, I know how to get where I'm going. And we're worried about being nice, not hurting anybody. I want that, but I don't want anybody. Fine. Then don't be apologetic for what you want. Be reasonable. Vet it in your own consciousness. And when you decide that you are worthy of it, and it is a good thing for you to move towards, attain, have, or whatever else, then affirm that and march towards it. Because then, with your thought, the might of your thought going out, everything cause and effect. So there will be impulses and things coming back to you. Because the universe is set up to work that way. It's not there to go, oh, Fred just came up with something he wanted. Will somebody go up? It's just automatic. It works like that. So when we grasp all this in the spiritual teaching, we can even have strong opinions about things. Because being able to be neutral, positive is not being weak. We simply don't attach unnecessary emotion and fixedness. We could stand very firmly for certain things and against other things and still have a neutral, positive frame of mind. Non-polarizing. We're not deliberately creating oppositions. We are creating things which may be opposed and have opposition to them. But we are creating something for its intrinsic goodness, and now we have to determine as we progress towards it, is it all good? Is it still the same? Do I want to modify it? Look what's coming here. Oh, that's so. This is our responsibility. Put it out. That's what people that overpray, it's like if there was a cosmic UPS guy, he doesn't know what to deliver where and when, because this stuff is all, oh, and I want to look, and I want to look. Good luck.
Okay.
So as we've said, the might of the thoughts. Thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions, and that accords with the law of causality. This is, cause and effect. We all know about the pendulum. The law of the pendulum, I like to call it. A little cause, a greater cause, bigger effect, things swing around, it's delightful. There we go. Whoa, look at that. But it's coming back like a wrecking ball, or it's bringing you some bounty because you created it correctly. And all of these things are connected. Environmental damage and devastation, terrorism, attacks, human behavior, human thinking.
Where do you learn about these things?
It's all available, most of it for free, a lot of it, on my website. I have cards here.
No, I mean, be certain how to conduct yourself.
Okay, I will get to that. I said there was a new translation of the teaching of Emmanuel. It's called the Talmud Emmanuel. That's on my website as well. And rather now than go into more about it, because all this stuff is available, if you're interested, I'll give you a card, website and blog is there. But to answer that question, it is through studying teaching. Just like whatever you took as a major, whether it's in high school or university, to study something, to become proficient, you study the spiritual teaching. And the funny part about this kind of teaching is the more you read it, the more it seems like, I don't remember reading that before. Oh, gee, that's in there too, because we still have to really saturate ourselves more and more with the opportunity to have this stuff come to us, so that we can take it into consciousness if we want. When we speak about prayer, by the way, this is a little bit about Emmanuel. There were 17 female disciples, not a one of which made it into the Bible. 17 women. They were more important than the men. That's why they weren't in there. How Emmanuel actually healed people and performed so-called miracles. About the healers who worked with him, unknown information about his wife and children, and what happened after the crucifixion. Emmanuel didn't raise people from the dead and all the rest of this. He was taught, remember the so-called missing years of Jesus and all? He was being taught not only by the Pleiadians, but in the Himalayas, by very advanced yogis and things there who were able to teach him great control over the body because they knew he's going to get crucified. He's got to appear to be dead, or they really will kill him. We read this stuff and go, oh my gosh. Not only that, but you see that with miracles, the miracle was he was taught a couple of main things. One, he became a master herbalist. He knew about all the uses of all the plants in the area. So when people came in with physical afflictions, meaning things that could be treated, he could provide a balm, a salve, an ointment, a tea. He knew what those things did. But also he knew people. He understood human beings at their core. So when people came to him with what we would call psychic disturbances, psychological, emotional illnesses, demons which don't exist, meaning disturbances in the psyche, he could understand a person so well that through his suggestion, he would reach their own inner consciousness whereby they could mobilize their own healing powers. There's a hypnotist therapist whose name was Erickson. I forget his first name.
Milton.
Yes, Milton Erickson. And he would, it just reminded me right now, he would sit and he would tell people stories where they didn't know what the hell he was doing, but they would walk out of there and suddenly their lives were straightening out. He was someone who, intuitively or whatever, had this ability to reach people, and hypnosis was a part of that, a genuine kind of hypnosis where he could entrain people, relax them, help them to initiate and mobilize their innate healing. This is not the age for all of us to be running around healing each other. I used to do New Age comedy for about 12 years, and I would say, in the New Age, there's no unemployment. Everybody's a holistic healer. Can I adjust your chakras? Yes, you can. Will you run my meridians? Yes, I will. So everybody's running around healing everybody, and what they're saying is, no. In this time, learn to heal yourself through your consciousness and other things. Don't not go to people who can assist you physically, or mentally, emotionally, even psychiatrists, they don't rule that out. And even in certain cases, some people need psychiatric drugs because they are so incapable because of chemical disruptions, whatever. Don't look down on people that need to take an appropriate medication. They can be helped then with a good therapist. It's like the right tools at the right time. But don't make it your calling to run around and quote-unquote heal people. Heal yourself. Be the example. Billy teaches by example. He doesn't walk around ever talking about UFOs. He's working with gardening, helping people do things. He's just a guy. This is the original, I'll get you 1 second, sir. This is the original Lord's Prayer from the Talmud. My spirit, you exist within almightiness. May your name be holy. May your realm be born and awaken within me. May your power unfold itself within me, on earth and in the firmaments. Give me today my daily bread, so that I recognize my guilt, and I recognize the truth, and lead me not into confusion and delusion, but deliver me from erroneous assumption. For yours is the realm within me, as well as the power and the knowledge forever. Amen. Now, this is where these terms were explained better for these times. It wasn't the spirit within that we are told to pray to so much as our own consciousness at this time in our evolution. My consciousness, you exist within all. May your name be, that name equals spiritual and consciousness-based power. Holy is controlled. May your spiritual and consciousness-based power be controlled and venerable. May your power unfold itself within me and in the firmaments in all consciousness levels. And then the rest of it. So that, of course, got changed into a Father in heaven kind of thing outside of us. So let me jump into something right now. I think we can. This is the Salome Peace Meditation. This is something that's done here on earth, 2 weekends a month. It is done still on behalf of us by 3.2 billion extraterrestrial human beings to help us bring peace into our world, which is enshrouded in heavy negativity. Salome Ganan Ben Urda Ganiber Asala Hesporuna. Peace be on earth and among all beings, from an ancient Lyran language. And that is recited, it's just out recited for 20 minutes, any way you want, silently, look under your breath, loudly. Some people sing it in a group. Do it. Everybody can do it. They don't have to follow each other. And this is the actual symbol. Now, this is something to think about. Do you recognize anything in there? Something look mildly familiar?
Tree of life.
Yes. Tree of life. And
Peace sign upside down.
turn that upside down, and you have what we think is the peace symbol, which is a symbol for death. People for 60 years have been walking around carrying signs with the rune for death. The sword, the rune for death. This is the tree of life, the true peace symbol. When people give each other the peace symbol, do they do this? No. They do this. There it is. So this is the true peace symbol. We have books with hundreds of these symbols. There are actually millions. Meier learned over 3.2 million symbols to recognize when his conversations are transmitted back to him, the ones with the play iron, transmitted back in symbols, not in German. He has to, with one hand, he types them out, simultaneously translating them into German, sometimes at over 100 words per minute with one hand. We have film of that, it's kind of cool. Okay, so let's talk about, well, what is the spiritual teaching? How would we do that? And let's see if we can take, I have a DVD here which has a whole workshop on the spiritual teaching. The first half of the DVD is a lecture in the Meier case, did it years ago. Second half is a full-on, step-by-step means of doing this thing. I called it, when I created this process in 1990, I called it Standing in Spirit because it happened to me while I was standing. So let's talk about, well, what is the spiritual teaching? How would we do that? And let's see if we can take, I have a DVD here which has a whole workshop on the spiritual teaching. The first half of the DVD is a lecture in the Meier case, I did it years ago. Second half is a full-on, step-by-step means of doing this thing. I called it, when I created this process in 1990, I called it Standing in Spirit because it happened to me while I was standing. A quick story just so you understand. So I was taking Qigong classes at that time, and we were just stand for long periods of time like this, eyes closed. And I had just had a little breakup with somebody in my life, and I had a big knot about the size of Texas in my stomach here. And so I was standing in the garden, and I was learning from a little Chinese guy who didn't speak much English. And suddenly, I'm drawn to this, and I kind of get like a little intuition of, well, ask your spirit to show you the core of the pattern. I didn't know what that came. Oh, yeah, fine, that's good. So for the next 15 minutes or so, I'm reliving my relationship, not with the girlfriend, not with my mother or my sister, with my father. This crazy thing of all of this emotionality stuff. And heat is just radiating out. My eyes are closed. I'm seeing red. Do you ever hear that term? I'm really seeing red now. I was really understanding violent rage without any external evidence. Stuff is just... Suddenly, after about 15 minutes, I'm still there and going, what difference did that make? And then I hear, think about your father again. I went, oh yeah, that was my dad. He did the best he could. What's the big deal? I went, what? And I'm kind of going, why did that suddenly lift? Where'd they go? And then, now think about her again. I'm going, yeah, Jan, nice girl. Why aren't I feeling hurt? So for the next couple of weeks, literally, I'd come to class. I knew I couldn't even begin to try and explain this to my Chinese friend. And I would try to find something to provoke myself, an emotional thing. Because I would not only get images and thoughts, but the feelings, I could also identify where they were in my body. And by not doing anything forcefully, through observation and just breathing normally, no fancy, nothing crazy, I would breath in, breath out. Take in the image, take in the thing, really let it go, in and out. These things would dissipate. And then I would look around, where'd they go? And they're go. And then I saw, well, wait a minute, how do I know if I'm really done with this issue? Okay, I'm going to bring up that thing I was thinking about in the beginning and really try to crank it. So when I couldn't provoke anymore, when I couldn't reinitiate the trauma, the feeling, the issue, I would go, well, I think we're pretty well through that. But I also knew, and it turned out to be true, that you can feel like you're really clear of something until one day you're walking around and somebody does something and re-stimulates, or something pops up from within you. So then, how do you deal with that? And then I figured out, here's how you deal with it. If something happens and you re-stimulated a pattern, an issue you had, and you don't know what to do, the first thing is just be conscious that it's going on, even if you're in automatic, doing the same thing you usually do, such as hitting yourself on the head with some imaginary item or whatever. Just know you're doing yourself, okay, this is what's happening, I can't do anything. The second thing is do anything but what you usually do. Start singing, dancing around, whatever. The third thing is you choose how you will react, if you're going to react, right? You choose how you will deal with this thing that has reappeared. You've already processed, so you're not in so much fear, but you're a little in dread that it's back. But there's a mechanism now by which you can further dissipate the charge. We don't necessarily get rid of everything in our lives that are issues. We can bring them way down on that scale. Like, in a sound studio, you bring down those faders and all. You keep it really below the level where it can even if your subconscious mind has got a little bit of it, it's not going to do anything to you. Yeah, that's what we all have, subconscious minds. So what I'm going to do right now is you don't have to move or anything else, you just sit there. And what I'm going to suggest is we try this in the privacy of your own consciousness. When I do this with groups in a more full-on manner where we, let's say, spend more time or whatever, I never ask people to tell anybody what their issue is, what they're going through. I just give you some steps, and we just offer them out that you can play with them in this time to try to work out, test something. So I will ask certain questions, such as, has everybody got this? Are you doing that? Whatever. So raise your hand if you can think of something in your own life that's still a little problematic that you'd like to clarify more for yourself. Anybody have that? I should have said anybody don't have it. Good. That's all. We all have it, let's face it. And it can be a larger or smaller thing, whatever. What we're going to do in a moment. Now, it's called standing in spirit because the way I usually teach it is standing. I'm not going to ask you to do that. You can do that,
this standing, but you can do it sitting, and you can even do it lying down. The reason I've found that the standing worked very well after, it had happened to me that way, but someone said to me, you should call it standing in spirit. I said, great name, we'll use it. Then I realized the metaphors. You're no longer standing for certain things. You're standing up for yourself. You're taking a stance. You've got understanding. And now you are supporting yourself solely on two soles of your feet. You're not lying back in some cushy thing. You're not in a pool floating around with people yama doing stuff and waving incense. You're just nakedly available to yourself, but you can do it sitting. So that's how we're going to do it. So here's the thing I'm going to suggest. Make sure you have a little room that you feel comfortable enough. If you feel you want to take another chair, that's fine. No one will be offended. And if they are, we'll ask them to work on it. But what you're going to do in a moment, I'm going to say to you, look, I'd like you to, if you feel comfortable, close your eyes so you have the privacy of your own space and your own consciousness, and just bring something. You can start now with this as you hear this. Find something you want to work on a little bit that's been a little bit of an obstacle or an issue, large or small. Just find it. Now, when you identify it, I want you to be like a good reporter for a newspaper or a TV reporter. I want you to pay attention to how you know this is an issue of importance to you. And by that I mean, I want you to allow yourself to become aware of any and all of the context. That means the memories connected to this, the faces, the sounds, if you smell or hear things internally, and especially any feelings in or around your body that you have when you think about this. I don't want you to try and change it or resist anything. I want you to note so that you have a good sense, because we're going to return to this context to test it out in a few minutes. So when you have a sense for yourself of what you want to work on now, and take a little time if you need it, then, and only then, just open your eyes, and we'll go to the next step. And there's no rush. If you need more time, just raise your hand so I don't roll over you here. Or raise your hand if you've got the idea of what you want to work on. Whatever issue it is for you. Okay. And again, you're not going to say this to anybody. It's not what it's about. Now, in a moment, I'm going to have you close your eyes again. But for right now, I'm just going to tell you what we're going to do so you know. We're going to have you bring that whole thing back into your conscious awareness. And there's some things I'm going to ask you to not do, and then I'll drop the other shoe. I don't want you to resist, deny, negotiate, justify, explain to yourself. I don't want you to do those numbers on yourself when you're aware of whatever you want to work with. However, because we're human beings, we sometimes do those things anyhow. Should you find that while you're trying, quote unquote, to work on this thing, this other element of denial, resistance, whatever comes up, then you can shift your attention to that and process that. You'll understand more what I mean as you do this. So, are we kind of ready to begin? Now, what I'm going to do is you'll hear me talk occasionally, but it's not all that important. It's more about I'm suggesting focus or whatever. I'm just trying to also keep you here so you don't, in present for this, so you're not drifting off and forgetting what you want to do. So I suggest just gently close your eyes and take a little time now to recreate that issue for yourself. I suggest letting your hands rest gently in your lap or by your sides, uncrossed legs if you're comfortable enough, so that you're just fully open to yourself. Feet could rest on the floor or not, whatever you want. Fold your hands together, leave them open. Just be comfortable. Now, bring that issue up, and please keep your breath going naturally in and out. Don't hold your breath. And I want you to be willing to receive the moment, that is, what you are aware of, and that can be anything or nothing even, it's okay. On the inhales, receive it. On the exhale, just be willing, let it go, And if it comes back on the next inhale, so be it. But your process, your job right now, is to be breath in and breath out without defending or resisting, noticing where in your body your attention may be drawn by this issue or situation. You are just wanting to see it for what it is now. You are simply being 100% self-responsible and willing to see things as they are within you. Breath in and breath out. If you notice a particular concentration of energy, also known as feeling, sensation, connected to this issue anywhere in your body, let your attention also go there and keep the focal point. See if you can keep this issue in the forefront of your awareness and let it appear to you and reveal to you what, if anything, it wants to, without expectation. Breath in and breath out at your own pace without holding your breath. We're going to let another minute or so go by where you keep your attention here gently with yourself. Be curious and childlike in your willingness to let something unfold for you, for yourself, consciously now. Breath in and breath out. If you lose any sense of what this issue is, bring back any of the memories, sounds, feelings, anything at all that will help you re-stimulate your awareness of what you are choosing to work on now. Breath in and breath out. If it's comfortable for you, let yourself exhale a little more fully so that your automatic inhale can also be a little more full. Focus more on just emptying the breath and then letting the breath come in. And keep tracking that which is somewhere in your own consciousness about this situation or issue. And in about 1 minute, we'll just slowly come back. But for now, just maintain your own focus. Now, see if you can just take a little more breath for yourself and search around with this thing, this issue or situation, or anything that occurred during this process, and just, like a child, curiously examine, breathe, feel, breath in, breath out. And as you do that, in your own timing here, over the next maybe 20 seconds or so, see if you can just allow yourself to come back into conscious awareness of your being here, what the situation is inside of you, and you still have that, but you're going to open your eyes gradually. And then the kind of questions that I'll ask will not require, or not even ask, for any specifics. I just want to see, and I want other people to see with each other here, how this process works or proceeds. This is like a little mini thing. We're using only a few minutes. So what I'll ask is, does anybody want to say anything about, again, not your personal experience about what you're dealing with, but how was it for you when you agreed to let yourself go consciously to something, and even though we only took a few short minutes, you let it present itself to you, and you're facing your own thing inside of you, and you're breathing, and you're having a certain deal of curiosity. Now, does anybody have any comment at all about that? Anybody else? So I'll ask some other questions.
I want to say something.
Please.
Well, it's like when you first ask us to think of something that we want to work on, if it's a difficult thing, because sometimes it is if you want to work on it, then you're going to feel maybe angry or afraid or some kind of like overpowering negative emotion. But when you're breathing it and you're actually doing the exercise, just for me, I didn't feel so much.
Good.
That the feelings I have when I think of it with my consciousness.
Right. So you've hit on two very important things, at least, maybe a couple more. When we do this, maybe I should have said it at the beginning, the thing we want to do first is to give ourselves permission to know that only that which is manageable to us will be presented to us by our own internal highest level of inner wisdom inside us. That's why this isn't about talk therapy or somebody doing anything with it. You can always bring your work to a therapist, but if you know that it's safe for you because you make an agreement with yourself, it's not a bad idea. I even have like a little operating principle I will sometimes express in the beginning of this and then see if people agree with it. One thing I wasn't, when I created this, I was not at all partial to affirmations. I thought they were used too often as Band-Aids. So like the next night I wake up and I had to write out this thing. And at the time it went something like this: by the love, power, force, and will of my spirit, I use the term spirit instead of consciousness, I disconnect, forgive, complete, and release these limiting patterns, influences, behaviors, and beliefs, and I remove and replace them with the positive, loving qualities of my consciousness. So that meant that I'm drawing upon all of the energy of creation as it is within me, my highest inner level of wisdom, and I am letting go. A lot of our healing has to do with our letting go of our own grip, which is sometimes very unconscious, but it's very strong, on an issue, a situation, a person, a resentment is holding on. So when we forgive, when we let go of our grip, we can let that circulation, that healing take place. As you just said about, anger, this, that, and the other thing, another way of working with this, another element that can be brought in is to say, and I sometimes do this when I'm doing, a longer session with people or a group or something, I say, look, when you come into contact with something, you might feel, if I asked you what is it, you might say anger, grief, sorrow, sadness, you'd have a term for it, right? So that's fine. All I ask you to do is slide that term over to the side. You can always get it back whenever you want it. But for that thing called anger or grief, I want you to let it show you how you identify it as anger, as opposed to sadness, as grief, as opposed to rage. So you have to be curious about, you have to be literally looking within, feeling within, listening within this thing, this anger I've got about so-and-so. Well, how do I know that? What happens? And you may feel, well, when I think about it, my head goes back and up, and there's this thing maybe here where a lot of emotion, feeling stuff is generated around the psyche. This is the core area for the psyche. So if it draws me, if I have a strong association to this term or this gestalt, this thing, and I feel it here, I'm not going to worry so much about the term. I'm curious about what is this. I'm just going to project some stuff because I've had this and other people I've worked with. Well, it's a dark, tight energy. Well, really like what? Well, it's kind of presses in here. Okay, so you're focusing there and just breathing and all what's happening. Well, it's funny. It's like it's opened out and it's not there anymore. Is it somewhere else? Well, some of it moved here. So we are being very discreet in our inner observation. That means we're fearless. When children are curious, they're not filled with fear. We have, through the years of our lives, how many years we've had traumas, disappointments, hurts, tragedies. And so we contract in different ways and in different places inside of us. When we are able to go and notice that and be curious rather than defend, close off, back away, be fearful of it, we notice it. It's like, I would tell people, think about, remember the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain? He had a microphone and his voice is booming. They pulled the curtain back. This is a little guy. Oh. And, this is what happens to us. This is my own little theory about things like neurosis and all the rest. When we're very little, under the best of conditions, which have diminished rapidly in the current world, as infants, as babies, we're loved unconditionally. We feel nurtured and caring. We're floating around in bliss, right, if everything goes well. And then at a certain point, maybe we're 1 or 2 or 3, we're about to touch a hot stove or pick up a knife and stick it in our forehead, and somebody goes, no, don't do that. And suddenly we get an energy from this loving caregiver that just doesn't compute. We can't think, it seems like Aunt Edna wants to prevent me from sticking that knife in my forehead where my third eye should be. Thank you so much. We're not intellectualizing, we're in shock. And we contract inside ourselves. Now, depending on our experiences when we're little and as we grow up, certain experiences in life tend to give us shocks and even to reinforce where what do? We start armoring ourselves, right? So we armor based on some of the earliest trauma. And again, I'm not talking about the terrible things that the world is filled with now, but under the best of circumstances. So that means that we're neurotic when an external or internal stimuli occurs that has nothing to do with the original assault on our sweet psyches, and we go into a habitual behavior. We tick, we twitch, we shut down, we tighten up, we cry. And this happens as we get older. People get into strange behaviors, and it's connected very often to things that happen when we're very young. We can, even while we're adults like this, we can connect in such a way that we get to see, it's like we finally are going, well, give me your best shot, because as the dreaded thing approaches us initially, sometimes we're still contracting, we're a little fearful, but we're breathing in and out, like you said, breath in, breath out. We realize instinctively as well as intellectually that this thing that has controlled us or troubled us doesn't have any more energy than what it's now brought to the table. We can literally say, give me your best shot. And the little guy behind the curtain can keep on going, boo. And we're going, suddenly we get to a place, this is interesting, this is curious. Oh, that's what it's about. Now, in 3 minutes or 4 minutes, we may not get there, but as I say, there's a DVD that shows you how to do this and if you grasp the idea, you can do it yourself. You can do it with a therapist, whatever. This is one of the ways of using the spiritual teaching to heal the inner stuff that has crippled us to whatever degree or inconvenienced us, locked us up, caused the hurts, the unforgivable and unforgiven, and the fears of intimacies and connections and openness, because we've got all this stuff. So when we are able genuinely to go, give me your best shot. I'm at the core, baby. What is it? You'll get things like, you'll start to feel, I believed that all this time. I'm unlovable. I'm not worthy. I should be ashamed of myself. No one will ever do this. I'll never do. Where did I pick that up? And then you can keep moving through layers where you got this message and where you got that message. And you can take a message, a negative message, like, I'll never amount to anything, whatever it is. And you can use the affirmation to find out where it makes you contract. You can use a positive affirmation that way. You can say, I'm a loving and prosperous person. Yeah, you know, and then see what collapses in if you don't believe that. You know, it's rich people don't have affirmations in their refrigerators. I'm a rich, prosperous person. They know it. They're onto something else. You know, this is the thing about affirmations that I didn't like, whereas people are working so hard to affirm something they don't really own. So if there's something you keep affirming and you don't have it and you want to take the affirmation in the privacy of your own consciousness, you repeat it inwardly. You can even say it to yourself out loud because that has a certain vibratory effect. And then you wait for the resonance. Like you drop something, a pebble down a shaft. You're waiting to hear plop. You know, when does it hit bottom? So then you might feel it in one area or another where there's a contraction. Then you go, it's like, wow, that's like finding gold, because you can go, oh, so when I say that, oh yeah, there it is. And then you remain curious, you keep breathing, you bring that affirmation back if it seems to disappear. You work with, where is that contraction? What is that? And very often we'll find that we've got places that are holding on for dear life inside, you know, and everything else seems great, but we're locked up in somewhere. And then you have compassion for yourself. You go, okay, so what happens if I release this energy, dissipate the negative charge, and let the energy circulate in me again about something? And liberation takes place. And things happen in their own timing. Sometimes a person has carried a thing even silently, or they've tried to deal with it, and then they're finally ready and they go to it. And bang, it's like I wrote a song 34 years ago. Carrying a heartache everywhere you go, feeling like somebody you don't even want to know. So you hide the hurt inside you where you think that it won't show, but the farther down you push it, the more the pain just grows. So forgive yourself. It's really not so bad to forgive yourself. It'll make you feel glad to forgive yourself for the wrong you think you've done. Forgive yourself and then forgive someone. Now, maybe you're a parent who couldn't show their love. Maybe you're a child who never got enough. Maybe someone left you and you don't want to live. Before love can come through, you've got someone to forgive. Forgive yourself. It's really not so bad to forgive yourself. It'll make you feel glad to forgive yourself for the wrong you think you've done. Forgive yourself and then forgive someone. Your loving heart has had its time to grieve. Forgive, forget, and let your spirit breathe. Forgive yourself. And then you're doing that for you, because no one can really do it for us. This is why this whole thing always comes back. Self-responsibility. See things for what they are. Neutral positive thinking. Control your thoughts. Embrace that which you might have been trying to push out of you. Let it be there, but look at it. Get curious. And then, like a frightened puppy or something, it starts to look up, and then it might stretch its body and stand up inside of you and smile and bark and run around and wag its tail and go somewhere else, whatever it is. This is what's beautiful about the spiritual teaching. And this is a little teeny thing. The elements of the self-responsible see things as, this gives you a theater in which to work any time you want, wherever you are. You can be sitting on a plane, you can be driving, you can be talking to someone. These things are, all these elements that are within us are like field aspects for exploration, if we choose to do it. Some things we may not feel are that important. You can let some things go. Okay, I always do this thing, but it's not a big deal.
Hey, can you say a word about the, I heard you mention the third eye.
Oh, well, you know, people speak about the third eye. I used to have a contact lens I kept in it. That was when my Kundalini wouldn't rise, my chakras were shut down, and I had the New Age blues. But the third eye is simply refers to usually the area behind that's the pineal gland, and back centered deep in the center of the brain is where the spirit actually is located. This is a focal point for meditation for many people and all that stuff. There's not a lot, you know, we could talk about, well, is your pineal gland calcified? Don't worry about it. Through the exercise of your deliberate consciousness, your practice with any and all of these things that you feel more drawn to than others, because there's a lot, you go, oh, I like this particular affirmation, or I like that particular technique or something. We evolve. We do it for ourselves.
Do you know if it's a place in your own self that you can go to and participate, or I don't know what the word is. I mean, with something that's taking place there. If it's a center, like you say, where the spirit comes in, or
the spirit is located already there. We cannot perceive the spirit. We can't do anything with it. Think of it more like this battery of energy. As far as we're concerned, it enlivens the whole body. When the spirit leaves the body, the person has died. There's no coming back. So-called near-death experiences are not really death. It is the consciousness gets a little oxygen starved and things happen, and people can have a sense of seeing themselves from above because an aspect of their consciousness can look down. But we don't leave our bodies. When we leave our bodies, we're done. So this isn't too much to be made out of this at this point. There's information on the website. You can read about the pineal gland and all this stuff. It's more about create your own intention. If it's to find out more about the pineal gland and focus there, that's fine. That interests you the most, whatever it is. I'm just suggesting that with things like this type of work, where we can know that if something has been a problem, if we've carried something within us for a long time, we never seem to get resolution, we feel a bit trapped or handicapped or tripped up by something that sabotages us, that's just an element of our behavior, whatever, why won't we? First, we have to know it's safe. I'm not going to get overwhelmed by something. Suddenly I'm not going to get overcome with, you're a guilty bad person and I am me telling myself that, we're not going to do ourselves in once we authorize ourselves to do this type of work, internal awareness work, okay, consciousness awareness. And then we only really get that which we can handle. Some people will do a session and say, I didn't get anything. I said, well, that's fine. Well, but aren't I supposed to get no? Because sometimes you won't get anything. Just the fact that you're willing to stand there and be with yourself or sit there and be inward and quiet, that might be what you needed to get then. I'll tell you a story. Quick one, I hope. Years ago, shortly after I created all this stuff, I knew a woman who was a psychotherapist. I didn't know her real well. We were just acquaintances through someone else. This was in Venice, California. And I told her one day, we were taking a walk, and I said, I created this process because after I did it for myself for a couple of weeks, I started to do it with people who would do it, and I did it on a couple of psychotherapists for their feedback, and they loved it. Oh, this is great, big breakthrough. Okay, fine. And I got taken to Europe by a consultant for the late Princess Diana to teach this to business and governmental people in Europe, in groups and stuff. So we took more time. You guys have been here for hours, and I don't want you to just sweat away, but you've gotten a sense of what this is about. So I said to this woman, I did this process, and are you interested? No, that's okay. So she tells me, she says, I want to tell you more about what I've done. One day we get in a conversation, and she said, I belonged to a spiritual group here in Los Angeles. I said, and she mentioned the guy was called Rama. Probably nobody knows, but a white guy, had a big afro. Frederick Lenz was his name or something. And she said, and we had a big house and everybody would meet at, and one day he called me up to say, come on over, I need you to help me do some work with the stuff, and blah, blah, blah. And I came over and he said, well, let's go upstairs and I'll bring out the papers or whatever. She said, so we went up to his room and he opened the door and he walked in, he says, and he went over to a desk drawer and he pulled out a gun and he raped me at gunpoint. I'm going, oh, God. I said, I got this process. She said, that's okay. So about a week or two later, we're taking a walk, and she said, that process you've got, would you be willing to do it with me? I said, well, sure, of course. So she lived in this tiny little place in Venice that literally was like from that table, across to there to here, and full of furniture. It was just nothing. You couldn't move it. So I said, well, can you do this standing? Is it okay? And she said, yeah, I'll do it standing. So we're standing, and it ends up literally, she's standing about as close as this microphone is. And she's standing there with her eyes closed, and we're doing this process, and tears start to stream down her face, and I'm not asking her I just try to, how are you doing? Still with that? And I'm a little voice to keep you here. And when we're done with it, and she's wiping her eyes, and I said, I don't want you don't have to tell me what you were doing. I said, I have a feeling that I might know, but the thing that really struck me, because, we started to talk, I said, we don't know each other all that well. You told me what happened to you at gunpoint with this guy that you knew and trusted. And here you are with your eyes closed in this teeny little place with me for 30, 40 minutes going through this thing, and you had enough trust in yourself to do this with someone who was almost a stranger in terms of real depth of relationship. I said, that's really neat. So the other neat experience, I had a whole bunch of people that would come and do this. So one guy calls me up because I had flyers put up around LA, and this guy says, I'm interested in doing this thing here. You got an older guy. So I said, fine, we book an appointment one day, and there's a doorbell rings or he knocks or whatever. And I go to the door, I open the door, and I go, holy cow, this big guy standing there, big old, I learned he was 72, and he's standing there like ramrod straight, and he's looking down at me with a funny look in his face, like, what's going on here? And I'm trying to invite him in, and he keeps asking me questions and check stuff out, and finally he decides he'll come in. I can tell right away I'm not what he expected to see, right? As he told me later, well, you weren't what I expected to see. You didn't have a white coat on, and it's not a doctor's office. He was coming to work on his hip. He said to me, can you work on a hip? I said, well, you can try it. So I said, okay, we do this, generally we do it standing, and anytime you need to sit down, I don't want you to keel over, just sit down. So we're no more than about 10 minutes into this thing. This guy's standing there, his eyes closed, talking him through the process, going through steps. He says to me, can I sit down? I said, yes, of course. So he sits down, I had a couch against the wall, It's like a condor. This guy's arms went from wall to wall. Big guy, stretches out, sits back and is looking at me. I said, how are you? You okay? He said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, how's your hip? Hip. Doesn't matter. I'm fine. I said, what happened? He says, it's my mother. I said, your hip? No. It's my mother. She never loved me. I didn't know it until now. Yeah, I came here. You didn't look like any kind of doctor, and I didn't know if I'd come in, and I'm standing there, and you're talking at me, and suddenly I just realized it's my mother. She never loved. I'm going, yeah, right. Is there anything else I can do? Would you want to book it? No, that's just fine. I needed to know that. What do I owe you? And it was like, I didn't know, because everybody is unique, right? Everybody's got whatever it is they want to work on. There were people that came to work on big emotional issues and lots of tears. One guy, or it was a woman, came with a whiplash. She was wearing a collar. Can you work with a whiplash? I said, well, it's up to you. By the time she was done with herself, she took the collar off and she said, yeah, that's better. Because it's the person themselves that make an agreement with themselves as to what the heck they're going to do. How far am I going to go now? And it's not about forcing, it's not about healing everything. It's about let's regain trust, self-responsibility, get curious about what this thing, my being is, and see what I can do. Now, earlier I said there are ways to use information from your past life. Well, how if you don't really remember your past life or lives? So this is a little connected, that's why I'm bringing it up here. There's something called the storage banks. We mentioned that, where everything that every person who's ever lived has said, done, felt, and all is stored, like in an etheric computer. There's also something called the comprehensive consciousness block and the personal. There's these terms in this case about things that we really don't have real reference points for in Western terms. Even in esoteric Eastern terms, we might have the idea of an Akashic record, but this is more. So, everything's stored. Now, we go to the idea of the might of the thoughts, because everything we create in life starts with our thoughts, moves to our feelings, then we have another thought, we do something or don't do something, and so it goes endlessly in each lifetime. In each lifetime, we reach varying levels, varying degrees of experience or expertise even, knowledge or wisdom in different areas. Now, considering the information in this case tells us that the average human being on earth is enlivened by a spirit that's already maybe 1, 2, 3, or more million years old, has been reincarnating in different personalities for thousands upon thousands of years. And we don't remember those lifetimes, fortunately. Who wants to remember being mauled by a tiger or being so madly in love with somebody that is no longer available to us? So there's reasons we can't just tap into that stuff at this level of development. But take an idea like, in this life I'm working in this particular field or career, and these abilities are necessary for this. So we use the might of the thoughts in this way. I consciously draw unto myself that which from any and all previous personalities was a level of experience, expertise, knowledge, or wisdom in this area that I can draw to enhance my current abilities. So your intention, I'm just using language right now, you can do it your own way. When we are affirming, we know what we're intending. If you're a doctor, if you're an investigator, if you're, an IT person, anything, in the past, through other incarcerations or incarnations, we have had experience, we've gained knowledge, it's all stored. It's stored. So we're calling upon it to come and be available to us to support and augment our consciousness, our development in our life now. Once we feel comfortable and we are affirming that, we might do it in a number of different ways and many times. It's always our responsibility, once we've put out a cause, to pay attention to what comes our way, internally, externally. Some things show up so fast in life, whoa, I just was asking for that. Other things, we just get a passing hint of something, but we follow it. Or it takes more time, whatever. Yes?
I don't mean to distract you from your flow of thought, but I was wondering at the beginning you mentioned that the point of it all is to get to, and there's a big display up there, the word truth. And I was wondering if you could maybe tell us the truth that is in this, like in a 60-second summary.
Ooh, that's a good challenge. Well, part of it is this. And again, this has to be determined and assessed by each individual themselves through their own work and investigation. Some of the truth in here is this. We are living in spirited human beings, all of whom bear within ourselves a piece of the universal energy that is the creator and sustainer of all that exists in this creation, in this universe. And that through countless incarnations as personalities and reincarnations of the spirit, the evolution of our consciousness and then of our spiritual development brings us to a place finally where we move not in a physically embodied form, but in a spiritual, energetic form, immaterial form, ultimately, into the beginning levels of the spiritual realms, the true spiritual realms, to begin the evolutionary process in there. This whole thing, from soup to nuts, so to speak, being incarnated in physical bodies, and then eventually to re-merge with the creation that birthed that which we truly are. Again, we're using these reference points. That's a multi-billions of years process. Now, certainly it's very appropriate to say this is presented as information because we can't sit here and prove the existence of the human spirit, though we could have discussions that could lead us to certain conclusions. So it's not to be believed so much as one chooses whether or not they want to study, test, apply the teaching to see what happens inside of each of us, in our consciousnesses, in our lives, in real terms, in the material sense, in the immaterial or fine matter, finer consciousness levels inside of us. That other truths pertain to the fact that we are not alone in this universe. It's a big part of this, that there are literally billions of other races spread throughout creation. Hundreds of different configurations of the human form, intelligent forms that are not human, evolving plant and even, animal forms, the things that are presented here simply as information in the case that we work with. But to find truth in terms of the truth of the sovereignty of our own being, of the responsibility we have for everything we think, we feel, we do, how we relate to each other and to ourselves in our lives, those things are expressed in the spiritual teaching as truths. There are results that we are told we will have when we conduct ourselves in certain ways, but we still have to find out for ourselves in the process if those are the truths.
Are those solutions to the coming global disasters?
In the sense they are, because here's the good news, and we wait for the last part for this shoe to drop. In all this material, in the prophecies, in this material, we're told that in about 800 years, we're going to go kicking and screaming through a lot of stuff. In about 800 years, the human race has survived and evolved to a mass of humanity on this world that lives in accordance with higher principles of truth, love, peace, freedom, harmony, wisdom, compassion, fellowship, practices that we will have healed the damage to the planet that we have done and still are going to do, and damage to our species. It will bring many changes and mutate different things, but we will have this time when the mothers, the true mothers of the millennium, come into their fulfillment of power, and human beings on earth have balanced the male, the female. We haven't lost our, fighting spirit to pursue things, striving. We must always strive. Billy makes, it's very important. One of the books, he has a whole chapter on the importance of striving. Without striving, there's no life. Without life, there's no striving. We constantly must strive for these things in our life that are important to us, and everybody makes their own determinations, but they tend to be consciousness related. Love, transformation of the situations. There's going to be, there has been in the past through tremendous global destruction. We've got a new breed of it coming in a world that we happen to be here for now. And we have people caring enough to do what they could to warn us, to give us a peace meditation to do, to help individually and collectively to harmonize these vibrations and influences on earth. And so this helps us to proceed fearlessly, without fear. But knowing, okay, there can be things that personally, we're not immune from consequences. Things can fall on our heads anywhere or break down or whatever. But we now have a greater understanding. As we work this stuff to make the understanding our own, we have a greater sense and understanding of a part of life that is immortal that we're a part of. Not always is this personality, that person, but somehow we've never not known existence. Think about it. I don't remember my past lives. Yeah, but have you ever not known life? No. And it will be in coming lifetimes as well. While you won't remember this one, and because you're hearing about this information and you'll dip into it to whatever degree, you'll find it again in subsequent incarnations. That's an important thing. I want to wrap it up because, if there's any real specific question that didn't seem to get clarified enough, in a moment I'll ask. But basically, we could go on forever, and that's not to anybody's real service here. You really now have an introduction to this material, from the craft to the prophecies to the really important stuff, which is the spiritual teaching, and how when you get into the plenty of free material on my website, when you get into the books from Meier, you realize that we've had a little drop in the bucket here. And that's good, because now we have something to think about and work with if we want. Does anybody have a specific question related to this at this time? Yes, sir.
You mentioned races 3 times. Is there more than one race on this planet right now?
You mean like extraterrestrial race?
Anything other than sapiens?
Well, we have the surface dwellers here. That's all the human beings on Earth. Different races, and many of the races had different origins. Some races always arise naturally on a planet when the planet is ready, evolutionary-wise, to have human life start to appear. There is, according to this information, there is a subterranean race, probably more under the area of India, Tibet, Gobi Desert, descendants of extraterrestrials who were here long ago. They have very advanced technology. They want nothing to do with the crazy people on the surface. They may, however, come into play a little later on if certain things occur on Earth, because they could also affect them. But they have craft that can pass through the Earth and then rematerialize, go out of dimension. And their craft have been seen too among those craft. But they're not interacting with anybody, except Meier has seen them before. There are a couple people who did interact with the monk in India at the ashram. He saw them speaking with the monk there, and then he said they simply disappeared. They were gone.
I came across this site. There's plenty of information, as anybody knows, but it was all about the Sasquatch.
Right.
And the star people.
Those may be two different things, because while there's a lot of information that people put out tied into the Sasquatch and so-called star people, at least according to the information in this case, the Sasquatch, they are real, the Yeti, they're real beings. They are kind of hybrids between, I think, Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, something. They're kind of, bridging race. They
had a conversation with one, and they took notes, and he explained all this stuff about the interplanetary travel and where they came from.
Yeah, but again, we don't have evidence to test that. We can say, I've seen film taken by this guy, Kalani Lapsaritis, up in Washington State, of a number of...
Yeah, that's the one.
Right. You could see, it was broad daylight, there were some fences, one or two jumped over a fence, one came up close to the camera. It isn't fur, they have long hair, actually, all over the body. And I was amazed. It was really amazing to see these guys running around up there. And that way, I saw that about 10, 12 years ago. But the claims that people make about, telepathic communication and star travelers, I don't have evidence of that. I know that having seen the film, but I always had a sense there must be something to this. And the player have said to Meier, oh yeah. They showed Meier also Nessie, in the Loch in Scotland there, Loch Ness Monster, so-called. It is a plesiosaur, apparently. And there may be, as I think was said here, that there might be one in the lake here. But also there still are some dinosaurs, I think deep in the Congo. There's still some primitive life forms there. There's a lot of stuff we don't know. Meier was taken deep into the oceans where they showed him creatures we've never seen that exist way down. Occasionally, some of these pop up and get washed up on the shore, and huge things and colorful things. And they showed him so much stuff and explained so much. That's why this material... If you go to my website and you follow links to other translations and prophecies and predictions and spiritual teaching, you're going to just see that there's so much amazing information, and it's nourishing because it can make a place in us where we can think about these truly important issues, whichever they are to us, and evolve the thinking. And it is through the might of the thoughts, the way to live, the spiritual teaching, that we walk around not fearful. We know things are happening, some are coming, but we then find more and more like-minded people who want to be interconnected and intercooperative, right? Cooperative, interdependent, and that's fine. Some people know about this, some don't, but we can be open to more. I have a friend, I just have to say this one last thing. I've got a friend where I live, he's 55 years old, he's a lifelong Mormon. We couldn't have come from, he even says to me, how come we can sit out here on this bench? He's got a beautiful property, we sit and watch the grass grow. How can we sit here and just get along with each other so well and talk? I said, it's like this. He says, we come from such different, he knows that I'm not religious. I said, cosmologies, right? Yeah, cosmology. I said, here's your cosmology, here's my cosmology. Very different, except when you overlap them right in the center, that's where our values overlap. Love, family, peace, harmony, service to the community. We agree on that. So we focus on the values, not political parties, not religions and all that. We focus on the values. And he says, well, there's really nothing I disagree with about what Billy Meier said. I said, well, that's great. I said, but we don't try to force each other to convert, to think and agree. But he, every now and then, he turned to me and he says, well, what did Meier say about this? Or what did Meier say about that? Because he gets that even though it's not part of his really lifelong belief system, he gets that there's something authentic there and he wants to benefit from it. So We don't all have to study the same thing, but if we can just overlap on values, and those that want to immerse in this, I don't know of a better teaching on the planet. You find out for yourself, right? So I thank everybody who's endured here with us 4 hours. And I have cards over there if people are interested. I've got a couple books online. We've got books and DVDs and tons of free info. So thank you for coming, and we hope to see you again. My pleasure.